Good evening, and welcome to the City Council Special Session of June 17th, 2025. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Ball is absent. Councilmember Peacock.
Here.
Councilmember Montoya.
Present.
Councilmember Grant.
Present.
Councilmember Nash. Absent. It looks like Councilmember Hiegel.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Dixon.
Present.
Mayor Heikela.
I am here. We're not going to do it. Yes, would you all join me in a Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item number 1. Conducting a public hearing for consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution 2425-111, a resolution declaring that certain structures in the city of Norman are dilapidated and detrimental to the health, safety, and benefit and welfare of the general public, directing removal of the structure, establishing the date in which the work shall be completed by the owner, and authorizing the city manager to take steps to cause the work to be completed by the city, if not completed by the owner, within the date specified. I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and second. Motion on the floor is to open the public hearing. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast and the motion to open the public hearing passes unanimously.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to recognize Mr. Anthony Purinton.
Good evening. I'm here today to talk about the public hearing regarding the dilapidation and possible demolition of 1000 North Interface Drive. I'm talking representing city staff, I guess you would say today, kind of a summary of all of staff's findings of the almost 10 years of the journey where we are today with this property. In front of you, just to kind of start us off, will be an evidence packet of some of the material that has been generated by city staff and third parties in relation to this property. Just to kind of go over it, everything is tabbed, and in the first part, you'll see a table of contents. On the left-hand side will be a tab number, and everything under that tab number, it'll be behind the tab. There's also going to be a date and page number. Everything is numbered chronologically, front to back. So and through certain points of the presentation, I may refer to them either by tab number or by page number, and I'll give you those as we go. I've tried to make everything chronological so that you guys can try to follow along through the presentation. So hopefully, I know it's a lot of information and we're going to go through a lot of information tonight. But again, I hope that after the presentation, you understand why so much information may be necessary. I want to go through the procedural overview because I think this is something that council does not have in front of it very often, whereas other cities do this on a very regular basis. This particular item is a public hearing that we're required to hold according to state statute and our own ordinances when there is the potential for a dilapidated building that for cause should be torn down either by the city or the private property owner. I've referenced the applicable state law and city code in my presentation, and this hearing specifically is for you as council to hear why or why not the building should be considered dilapidated, and if so, torn down. And that's going to be your main role for this meeting in your capacity as city council. Consideration of the information presented by the parties. Part of the notice requirement was noticing the property owner is listed in the Treasury, Cleveland County Treasury, and any mortgage holder as shown by the real property records. They, I think, are here tonight and will be given an opportunity to present to you as well. And that is your first role, consideration of everything presented to you so that you can make a finding. Those findings would be a determination of, one, whether the building is dilapidated, which is going to be a definition that we go over shortly. And then third, a determination of, if dilapidated, whether that building should be removed. And if so, what the timelines and everything should be. So with that in mind, let's get started. So again, that first question is going to be whether or not this particular building, 1000 North Interstate Drive, is considered dilapidated. Dilapidated could mean a number of different things according to our code and state statute. I think we have 4 different ones, and I think honestly we meet all 4. First, I think, is going to be the most broad. Does the property, through lack of repairs, or is it in a state of decay or partial ruin, that it is hazardous to the health, safety, and welfare of the general public? The next 2 are going to be a little bit more specific in nature. We'll talk about that later in the presentation. Those are dealing with whether the property is secured or boarded. I think as soon as you start looking at the pictures of this property, that will become very clear. And lastly, whether the structure, as declared by the municipal governing body, constitutes a public nuisance, which we'll get into that again a little bit later because it kind of requires us to go into definition of what a public nuisance is. Okay, second question that you'll have tonight is, should the property be removed? Just because a building is dilapidated does not mean that you as council have to cause it to be removed. In our code, we allow for 2 alternatives. We can cause it to be removed or remain with ordering improvements to be made. And then under state law, if you are to order a property to be removed, you have to do so on a criteria of it being a detriment and hazard to the health and public safety of the general public, and that the property would be benefited by such removal. Again, we'll come back to this, but I just wanted to frame the discussion for you as we move through what, unfortunately, I apologize, will be a lot of context and history. So, with that context in mind, I want to take a step back in time. We're going to go back pretty far, unfortunately. Again, I have a long presentation. I wish it could be avoided. Unfortunately, this has been going on well before even how far we're going to step back in time, which is 2014. This building has been in the purview of city code enforcement and city permitting for approximately 10 years that we'll talk about tonight. There's more before then, but I think this is where I think we really start to see the most relevant issues. In 2014, this hotel was operating as a Holiday Inn. Unfortunately, due to the property being under a property improvement plan, that franchise was terminated, according to the owner's testimony at a May 20th hearing earlier this year. Again, based on that, a foreclosure was filed in 2014 by Bank of America, which ultimately led to the property being refinanced under a different bank. Then, because they lost their franchise, it was flagged independently as Norman Hotel until its closure 2 years or so later, either in 2016 and 2017. The reason I'm going back this far is twofold. First, as council, I think it's important that in a condemnation proceeding such as this, with such a large building, that we consider all the context. And I think that it deserves that much consideration, especially because this is an extraordinary remedy, in our opinion, as in we do not take this lightly, and we also, I can't remember the last time, and I don't think staff can remember the last time we have bring in an item like this to you in our collective knowledge. Part of that is because we strive so incredibly hard towards compliance. And that is something that I think you will see throughout this presentation. We consider this a last resort. And unfortunately, that is why we have brought this to council today. So the second reason, I think, is also, as we go through the presentation, I think it will become evident that there's a pattern that happens, that has popped up again and again and again, that has popped up before even 2014, according to staff. So I think that context is necessary because I think it will play into your decision that you make tonight and some of the alternatives that we have available. So step back in time, and we'll go to August 17th, 2017, which is the first time, I think, that we see the true nature of the degradation of the property, where we really start having eyes on it as a dilapidated building. That's going to be tab number 1. There are many pictures from this walkthrough if you want to follow along. We inspected it, several members of city staff, along with the owner representative. This was prompted after concerns of Dormant Fire Department after responding to a fire alarm, and during their search of the building revealed several fire hazards and other hazards, as you'll see in the pictures. I've only included some, and I don't know how well you can see on the screen there, but what you see here is a ceiling. In the hotel, multiple holes, water damage throughout. This is something that you can see throughout the building, and I think this is going to be a theme of kind of where the property is going and what are some of the issues that we think result in some of the later damage that we see. But it's throughout the building. The ceilings have collapsed, and there's a lot of mold. This property at this time is vacant, or at least it should be, but you'll notice also in some of the pictures that there is evidence of habitation illegally for people who have accessed the building, and squatters, whatever you want to call them, have set up shop. And this again is going to be a theme throughout this presentation, and it's going to be one of the linchpins of the city's argument of why we are requesting the property be removed. And finally, I think the moisture damage, as you can see, has contributed to other secondary issues such as mold. So in this walkthrough, we had several findings, all of them concerning. The exterior facade, which you saw in that first picture, was falling, laying on the ground. The interior had mold. There was evidence of vandalism and trespassing. A gas leak was detected during the site visit, which gas service had to be disconnected, resulting from that. There were electrical hazards present due to the water leaks and non-functioning fire alarm systems. And that's something I'm going to also harp on in this conversation. If you notice, and I think it's towards the end of these photos, you'll see some photos of the fire suppression systems, I think some taped over fire alarms, and things of that nature. I know that the fire department has been very concerned about this property for a long time, for good reason. And I think we'll, again, talk more about that as we get into other inspections of the property and other conditions. So, taking a couple of steps here, the city, again, caused the gas and electric utilities to be disconnected due to the health and safety issues they caused. They did declare the structure unfit for human habitation. We see the first of 2, unsafe or notice of unsafe structure. And then, again, the first of many. A task list that we've developed with the owner's representative at the time in order to bring the property back into compliance. This is the first of many promises that have been made, the first of many task lists that have been developed, many schedules that have been proposed. And as you will all see, none of them have been met. So we do get a step forward. This is a table that I will refer to throughout the presentation, and this is not all the permits that have been pulled and applied for on the property. These are the substantial ones. These are both demolition and renovation permits that have been filed and expired since 2017. The first 2 are going to be in 2018. Keep in mind, the original walkthrough was in 2017 with the condition it was in currently. The estimated construction of the renovation was $5 million. There was a hygienist report submitted showing that there was mold throughout the building. That's going to be on tab 40 if you'd like to refer to it. That permit expired in November 19th of 2019 with no inspections requested. The thing about permits is, I think, is it 6 months, Greg, that you can? Correct, that you go without any, inspections or anything else made, your permit is then expired. As you will see, this has occurred time and time again. This is first of three. First of two. So, again, I'd also like to point out fire suppression. In 2018, for the first of two times, we have a flooding incident that was a result of cold weathers deteriorating the pipes that supply the fire suppression system bursting, which I don't know if that has also led to the moisture issues apparent in the first pictures that we saw, but we do have, and this is, I think, going to be supported, I didn't put the tab up here, by an email to the owner's representative informing them, from us to them, that we have gotten notice of your building actively leaking and water rushing out. And it appears that the fire suppression system has begun to leak. And then at that point, again, we had to turn off utilities in order to prevent a more hazardous situation. Okay, after, around this time, again, this is going to be before the permit actually expires, but in September of 2019, we did another inspection. This is where we get into the really concerning territory of the building rapidly deteriorating due to structural failures. Right? As you can see in the picture, and I'm going to go ahead and refer to you in, I think it's going to be tab 2. There are a lot of pictures of the facade of the building, and it looks like to this corner, leaning heavily. We were made aware of the issue, and we got with the property owner, and we wanted to inspect the property. And keep in mind, permit is still open at this time. What we see is substantial. This is a steel beam, and if you notice, one, it's not supposed to be shaped like that. It's supposed to be straight, and two, this is extreme rust, right? Likely from water damage that has contributed to the building sagging where it was. There are multiple, I think there may be multiple beams. Here's another picture of an S shape when it's supposed to be straight. And then you can see also that's compromising the facade of the building. There's another picture of another beam, all again due to water damage from the appearance of it. So that was in August of 2019. This is a picture from August of 2020. Follow-up inspection. Again, a year later, December 16th, 2019, after 4 false alarm calls, theft of HVAC system, copper wiring, the fire sprinkler system leaks again. Again, water damage. The utilities, again, have to be turned off. The condition of the building has continued to deteriorate, and again, no improvements have been made. Here are the steps that the city took. After repeated inquiries with the property owner regarding these columns, and I will admit at the same time we are at the very beginning of COVID, which is a kind of a black area for most of the world and most of our memories. But again, the building's leaning, so we're inquiring with the property owner, disconnecting utilities, and it's not until I think around this time, November 19th, 2020, that we have an email from our code inspector, and I can't say that this is the first time, but this is one instances I know of that, or earliest, that we seriously threatened condemnation of the building. And that was again in November of 2020. Their permit expired in, I think it was about a year prior to that. And again, we had known and noticed them about the structural issue a year prior. So at this time, condemnation proceedings were indicated to the owner. And here's another image taken by the neighboring property owner where the facade of the building has fallen off and, it could present, obviously, an issue to anyone underneath it. So here's where we take another step forward after taking a couple steps back. we did get a step back in the right direction once we reissue permits for just the structural repair. Again, I would like to point you to December 17th of 2020. That's the date that they applied for the structural permit. It was 2 months later. It was given to them, and then they did, I will say, complete the repairs timely. That was done, that work was done by Powerlift. The city was in conversations with them, getting the contract with Powerlift. It took a substantial amount of effort in order to get that done. I'm assuming also on, during COVID and everything by the property owner. However, again, as we took one step forward, I think we take another step back as we look at the property records. A material men's lien is filed by Powerlift as well around the same time for over $200,000 for material men's lien. So I think this is starting, and I guess to us, to the city, things are starting to connect in terms of the kind of pattern, like the reason that we're here in the first place, right? It's starting to show the neglect shown to the property. And then we get to an October 2021 inspection. I would like to, at this point out that during this entire time, the property, for the most part, remains unsecured. If you notice in Janita Hatley's code report, I think that is going to be somewhere between 8 and 9. It should be tab 10. We've had 56 code violations on the property since 2017. We could have had many more, because I think is what you'll see is that this property has been continuously unsecured for years, not days. And this is where we get, in March 17th of 21, we find 2 people in the property, one of which is a minor. The other one is 18 years old. And this is going to be a theme, again, of people continuously entering into the building, including minors. And then in structural repairs are completed in April of 21. However, hazardous conditions are still present. While we do understand that this was probably a massive undertaking, one, it could have been avoided if proper property maintenance was used, and 2, this isn't solving the issue. This is at most putting a Band-Aid on a building that presents a hazard to the general public. And if you notice in the pictures from that 2021 inspection, the property is not in great shape, right? If you look at, I think this is, in fact, the corner of that same building, the roof of it at least, where you had the structural integrity compromised. And then if you look from inside the building, you can see sunlight, which, obviously shouldn't be able to. But in addition to that, there's still water throughout the building, right? Water down the walls, on the floor, collecting. If you'll notice, it's hard to kind of pick up on the screen, but on the bottom of those steel beams there, you can see where the rust on the metal has wicked up the water from the floor, which is standing water. We also have evidence, again, of people who are entering the property illegally, graffiti, meaning that people are actively and continuously accessing the site, which poses a danger to them. And as we'll get into a little bit more deeply later, any first responder that has to respond in order to prevent further loss of life or property. So what steps did the city take after the October 21st inspection? Again, this is going to be after they've completed the structural repairs on the property. After that inspection, we were still extremely concerned that the issues that led to that structural almost collapse, I should say, were present in other areas of the building that had not yet shown themselves. For that reason, in order for them to get another permit, we did require them to obtain an engineer's report that had their stamp of approval on it, so to say, at the end of the day, this building's not going to come down for structural reasons. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't, for structural reasons, a nuisance to the health and safety for anyone who would later be in it for unknown reasons once you put drywall up. So, again, we also found concerns of it being unsecured, leading to people being in the building, water intrusion throughout, and then finally, in December of 2022, you see a second unsafe building notice. And I'm going to refer back again and again to this document because I think it's a really great summary of some of the health and safety issues that are present still today with this property. And that's going to be on tab 12 and written by Greg Clark, our building permit manager. And again, it seems like every time we actually go and do an inspection, we have to open a case because the building is, again, unsecured. So, the notice of unsafe structure. If you'll notice in that, there's going to be a couple paragraphs, a couple pages of good reasoning why, again, it presents in the state that it is, post-structural repairs, a hazard to the health and safety of the community. We also, in that report, or in that letter, require that the building be made safe by July 31st of 2022. Obviously, we didn't make that, but if we didn't, again, demolition. This is, again, I'd like to stress that this is not a jump scare that the city has placed on this property owner. We have time and time again made sure to impress on them that this is eventually where we would end up if no action was taken. So, and then finally, it gave the owner the ability to respond and accept or propose alternative terms to the notice, which is what they did. And right after that, I just found this on Google Images looking at images of the property in January of 2020, and then we see the facade starting to go back up. Also, in terms of, and also in addition to the Powerlift materialman's liens, there are several other materialman's liens that were filed against the property around this time. So, alternative timelines to the one we provided. So in the unsafe notice, we provide, this is the time period that you have to comply and get your building into compliance. It does allow for them to suggest alternative timelines, which they did. In between, December 21 and June of 22, we are working with the property owner and their council heavily in order to make sure, again, the first priority is that the building is safe. Now, the first document that we received in order to justify the structural integrity of the building was a welding report. It was a one-page document, I believe, which did not address actual structural stability by an engineer. We do get a first report, which will be in your packet. Then we come back, we ask for a more comprehensive report. We do get that. And then we have a third-party engineer certify it, making sure that we are comfortable accepting that the building is structurally safe. And then finally in June, we are able to accept the alternative terms of the owner. And that's going to be tab 18 in that letter. In June 2022, the alternative terms that were provided by the owner shows that they would submit permits to the city June 27th, 2022, that construction closeout would occur May 29th, 2023, and that the property would open 2 years, almost to the day, before now. That didn't happen. What we do get is more delay. We take another step back. On multiple occasions, there have been two different property management and construction management companies that have been associated that we know of. It's kind of gone back and forth on who is hired at any given moment. First, we have Ocean Ridge, then we have KBCM, I think, or some similar acronym, and then we're back to Ocean Ridge, I think, as of today. But through the various processes and the various construction managers, we get multiple delays, multiple requests for delays of these permit extension deadlines. So, in October 17 of 2022, another deadline extension request. The permit submit target date was December 27th, 2022. We did not make that. They were going to open on that report December of 23. On July 17th of 2023, we have another deadline extension request. Now we're going to submit it in June 12th of 23. Their opening date was scheduled for just before, or their at least certificate of occupancy date was right before Christmas and last year. This is what their request detailed. A design team has been reassembled for this project and are making great progress. Premier Hospitality has secured the necessary financing to complete the project. You will hear this time and time again. And I have a feeling, because we know the pattern, that you'll hear it again tonight. We've heard it time and time again. The bank has heard it time and time again. And unfortunately, we have a building that is in the condition it is in today with no improvement. That being said, they did submit a permit eventually, 2 days, I think, after they said they would, on June 15th of 23, sort of. They only submitted for floors 2 through 6. They did not submit permits for the first floor. I think at that time, the idea was that they are engaging with Marriott, which they have been since 16, 17, in order to rebrand it as that kind of hotel under that brand. There were some issues getting consensus on first floor design, and I think where we're at here is that at this time, we've continued to extend and continue to extend the deadline. And what we get here, I believe, is going to be an attempt to delay. And I think you'll see why. We get another hygienist report. That's going to be at tab 41. That's going to be also showing, of course, mold and moisture issues present, and a recommendation that they figure out where the moisture is coming from. If you'll notice, the permit wasn't issued until April 19th of 2024. That's just shy of a year later. If you notice, I think Greg was a little nice in his report and staff report in terms of why that delay occurred. So so usually during the permit process, we get a first set of permit, and then staff issues some corrective comments. It sends it back to the architect. Then we get it back. We did that, and then we got, I think, another initial set of plans, and then we have one item that needs fixed. Is that right, Greg?
Ultimately came down to one, yeah.
Thank you. And I think it was more of a clarification.
The fire marshal was requesting confirmation that there would be a standpipe
Sorry,
during the,
I'll repeat what you say, yeah, if you,
during the construction of it.
gotcha. So, I'm not gonna be able to say that like Greg says that. So, Greg, I don't know. And if I tried, I wouldn't get it right.
Greg Clark, building official. So with respect to that permit, just as a few benchmarks, permit processes can kind of go back and forth depending on the nature, and this was a large scope, so wouldn't expect or unexpect something like that. But there was a total of almost 300 days to issue the permit. City staff accounted for 35 of those days, times where we had the permit in our queue, reviewing it, looking at it, discerning it, making comments. Client had the permit in their possession for 272 days, with most of that just sitting there waiting. And at one point, we literally were down to a single comment that was just confirmation to our fire marshal that normal construction safeguards for a 6-story building would be followed. It took several months after that for them to even address just this singular comment, which frankly, I would have expected an email the same day we issued the report, and we would have been able to clear it up just with, we acknowledge city. Yeah, we'll follow.
How many days specific? Was it 179?
On that one, yeah, there was 170. The first submission was made. There was a 93-day lapse between our comments and when they responded to it. We made the follow-up comments. It took 179 days, I believe, is what it took to actually get that singular comment addressed.
Thank you, Greg. So, again, I think the second thing that kind of shows that I believe that this was more of a delay than an actual attempt to repair and rebuild the property. As you'll notice, that there is no contractor, one note, there was no contractor listed on the permit. I don't know if there have ever been a general contractor listed on the permit, which is usually the case. And then we do finally, issue the permit in April 19th of 2024. And in doing so, they send us a updated timeline, which we accept, and that timeline again is going to be around December 24th or 23rd of 2024. And that is the deadline for the, again, because it's been extended multiple times, for the notice of unsafe structure sent in 2021. That was the deadline that we gave them. However, that deadline came and went, and there was no work done on the property. Some of the owner's testimony in a recent hearing in Cleveland County District Court sheds light on why that occurred. He did admit that, there were no construction crews on site of the property, at least in 25. He wasn't even sure about 24, but definitely there were in 23. Keep in mind, the permit was issued in April of 24. They were told, or they made the decision not to bid out the contractors until first floor plans were completed, because of course you didn't want to be, I think as one, the way it was phrased was be changed order to death, which makes sense. You don't want to start work on half the building before the full amount is complete. However, the information that we were getting is that the first floor plans were substantially complete at that time, which, keep in mind, we did not receive a final set of plans until May of this year. So, also see, and around the same time, we're also talking to the bank who has the mortgage. They also provided us some updates. And at this time, before that, I think property management company specifically was no longer working for the owner, they had been sending regular updates to the bank, who I'm sure, I don't know if they required that or if that was just an affirmative willingness on the property management or property construction company. But they were providing, I think, weekly or monthly updates, and that's going to be in tab 26. And you'll see some interesting comments, I think. They were framing the first floor before the permit was in place, and it was strongly requested to hold on to framing activities until after the MEP, electrical plumbing engineer, has finished design to identify the necessary penetration and sizing to ensure that we don't inherently have to perform any activities at additional cost. So what you see here is, again, the idea early that they should not continue until the full plans are in place. There are also some updates in there about how, there were some conflicts over pricing with vendors, which, considering the material liens, were a little concerning to city staff. And then on that date, we did send a letter stating that the permit had expired. They, did request a permit extension, as they have multiple times. And they mentioned that the availability of hospitality general contractors has been limited and resources were allotted to the opening of the Residence Inn by Marriott at 2400 Conference Drive here in Norman. The public space permit drawings are in the final design and should be submitted in February. They were not. Now that the Residence Inn by Marriott is open and operating, ownership would like to complete both guest room tower and public spaces concurrently. A lender change has also impacted the ability to proceed as new financing is in process. We acknowledge this project has taken longer than anticipated, but are committed to getting this back on track. They also provided a project schedule showing an open date of December 22nd, 25. Again, that was submitted earlier this year. That request was denied, mainly because, again, and again, and again, we have been given promises, assurances, timelines. And keep in mind, one of the first items on all of those project documents are going to be submission of plan documents. They couldn't even get past the first hurdle. They couldn't even submit revisions to a clarification comment for 179 days. At this point, before we made our decision, we decided to look at the property one last time. And this, I think, shows you, there was an earlier picture, and you can't even recognize probably the original graffiti because there's so much graffiti over it. I really want you to look at the condition of the property in January of this year. And I'd like you to compare it to the property, which is horrible, in 2017. Because something that I think the owner stated in the May 20th foreclosure proceeding was that this building is primed and ready for new construction. It's just waiting for us to begin renovation, which is true. It has been waiting since 2017. But this is anything if not dilapidated. That's also me trying to get into a broken door. I don't know who snapped that picture, but anyway, that was us accessing the building. As you can see, it's unsecured. There are multiple entry points into the building. The fence is that we required to be put up is practically useless. There is multiple entry points again, as you'll notice. Every window interior, it seems like, is broken, spray paint everywhere, multiple evidence everywhere of, accessing the site. This is the second floor. I mean, you can't deny that people are getting into the building, right? But I also want you to kind of look at this picture and any of the pictures from January and imagine yourselves in like 100 pounds of gear in smoke, going into that building and searching 6 floors to see if anyone is inside when there's a fire, because there's no sprinkler systems, there's no fire alarm, there's this in Garfield. So, again, this is the sky, but also the first floor. One of the things that we were told is that I think that the building's roof had been replaced, which was great because there was multiple areas of water intrusion, which if you fix the roof is great, wonderful, fantastic. But if none of the windows are intact and the roof still has holes, water's still gonna get in. And again, I think this is an even better picture of a second floor without railings. We can't let our firemen go in this in a fire safety situation. So either one, we send them in, or we don't, which could be, either way, it's not a good look. Here's the pool area, which, if you notice, it's not glass up there. That is totally exposed. And there's also a lot of graffiti, standing water, and if you continue to look in there, you'll just see more and more and more. So that brings us almost to now. So we deny their building permit extension request. At this time, the city begins preparing for the, again, extraordinary remedy that we never want to have to follow through on, which is demolition. In this time, we're in regular contact with the bank, who I feel like were probably in the same situation that we were, just as frustrated. And we were pretty open. I mean, we'd never been hiding it for years, that this was the path. Well, in May 5th of 25, the owner submits finally the building application number 6 for floors 1 through 6. However, the next day, and interestingly enough, the week before our condemnation hearing was First Bank and Trust files foreclosure proceedings and seeks an injunction to delay the city council hearing for 30 days. That injunction is granted. The May 20th hearing I've been referring to is the hearing that the bank requested in order to determine whether or not a receiver be appointed over this property and another property under foreclosure in Lawton, and that the request for a receiver was denied. And if you'll notice in the packet, there's also excerpts of that transcript and the owner's testimony. So And then at the end of that, we get our rescheduled hearing, which brings us to today. I hope by now you've seen the pattern that we've been noticing, which is that right when, push comes to shove, right when a deadline approaches or condemnation is looming, then it's hurry up and submit. But the last time we had a submittal for floors 2 through 6, if you notice, the intent was not to move forward. It was known that there was not going to be any construction on the property for the permit period because the plans had not been finalized. It was an attempt to delay. So, here today, as it stands, they have submitted permit application for full renovation. I ask you to ask the question, how is this time any different? Because what you'll also notice in the testimony is that they do not have financing, which, according to their property management or property construction company, they did have previously, but yet we still don't have a constructed final product. So I think, and what we found during the May 20th proceeding was that they're in progress of getting financing. You'll also see an excerpt in there that says the project cannot continue without financing, which is, considering the size and scope of the building, which was probably given. But you'll also notice that in addition to the promises that we have gotten that have not been followed up on, the bank has been given similar promises of refinancing. 3 prior attempts to obtain financing, all of which did not come to fruition. You'll also notice in the testimony that there is a lack of respect to acknowledge that it is possible that financing will never come. So now, again, we're at permit number 6. Is this time different? I sure hope so. But city staff cannot in good conscience allow another extension. So that brings us to the question. Is North Interstate Drive dilapidated? Again, I think we meet all 4 definitions. I think it is very hard to say that this building is not a hazard to the health, safety, or welfare of the general public. And I'm talking as it stands today, not when it was leaning, threatening to, fall on Outback. A structure, and now we're going to get into the, unfortunately, the nitty-gritty of statutory analysis. So, again, I'm going to refer back to tab number 12, which is the notice of unsafe structure, that talking about the hazards present in the building, which include, at minimum, to those accessing the building legally or illegally, right? First responders accessing the building in the event of a fire, which, again, is compounded by the lack of any fire suppression whatsoever, and also the surrounding property owners. You could also find, separately, that the building is dilapidated either because, 1, it's been unsecured more than 4 times in a 12-month period, any 12-month period, or that the structure has been boarded and secured for more than 18 consecutive months. Now, to get into the term boarding and securing, right, or unsecured building, I'll go unsecured building first, because I think we made it easier. Any structure which is not occupied by the legal or equitable owner thereof, into which there are 1 or more unsecured openings, such as broken windows, unlocked windows, broken doors, unlocked doors, holes in exterior walls, holes in the roof, broken basement, or cellar hatchways, unlocked basement, or cellar hatchways, or other similar unsecured openings which would facilitate an unauthorized entry into the structure. I implore you to find a picture that it does not look like that building is unsecured. Boarding and securing, the property has been ordered boarded and secured since 2017. And finally, I want to bring your attention to another definition, that any building or structure commenced and left unfinished, not properly protected, and which may attract children and endanger them in the course of play, shall be considered a health and safety nuisance. And I want you to hold that for just a second. Again, I believe that we have met all three of these. The building has been unsecured continuously for multiple years. These are just the affirmative measures taken by our code personnel and our abatement contractors, both in April 24, July 24, February 25, and March 25, all within a 12-month period, in order to secure the building. Keep in mind, during the course of this saga, code enforcement is doing the majority of the boarding and securing, not the property owner. Our contractors are going out and securing the building, which is the responsibility of the property owner. We then file liens against the property owner, and then it is collected if and when the building's property taxes are due, right? Again, we've ordered it boarded and secured it since 2017, well more than 18 months. And again, I'd like to bring your attention to this month. In June 2nd, we've had an incident. It was, admittedly reported by the owner's agent of two minor children attempting to gain access. They got inside the fence line and were attempting to gain access. At that point, their security, who was on site thanks to the requirement of the injunction issued by the district court, were able to stop them from gaining entry this time. One of those minors has previously gained entry into the building. So, question 2, because I hope that we can all come to a consensus that this property is dilapidated. Should the property be removed? This is a more difficult question. So, our code and state statute are a little different, but essentially it comes down to whether the structure should, 1, be removed, or 2, remain in place with improvements ordered to be made. And I'm substituting ordered to be made. And then state law, if you are going to order a building to be removed, you have to have 2 findings. 1, that it is a detriment to the hazard of the community, and then it would also be benefited by the removal of such conditions. So here's another way to look at it, which is if it's dilapidated, should the property remain with improvements made, or should we order the owner remove it? We have to show again that the property's condition is a detriment and that it would be benefited. Again, I don't think I need to repeat it, but the property conditions are hazardous, right? I also want to talk about why the property would benefit from being removed. And I'll be honest, it's because I do not think this property will be remediated in a timely manner, if at all. Here is a great example, and one of many. This is the Wichita Falls Hotel. If you notice, it looks a lot similar to the hotel in Norman. That is because, in part, it is owned by the same person or group of people in common ownership is the owner we have here. It's eerily similar. Different outcome. This property was never brought into compliance. What did happen, at least according to an April 12th, 2024 article from the Wichita Falls Times, hotel owner faces 233 criminal charges in Wichita Falls. Charges that related to code violations on the property, Class C misdemeanors with arrest warrants, carrying a total of $200,099 and $818 in fines. Wichita Falls handled it a little differently, maybe because of their state statutes, but they ultimately filed an eminent domain action and purchased the property. And then they did tear it down. Here's some more concerning issues. This is from the testimony from May 20th again. They have 17 operating hotels. This is going to be Premier Hospitality Management, I believe, which again are going to be an umbrella over multiple different related entities. They have 17 operating hotels, 3 of which are under development, including ours, which that's a nice way to put it. 5 out of 20 of those are currently in foreclosure. 2 out of the 3 actually are in Norman. So, should the property be ordered removed? I think that, again, considering the situation that the owner finds themselves in, that the city has found ourselves in since 2017, That is why we are here today to propose adoption of Resolution R 2024-111. This resolution, I'll summarize it, declares the building as dilapidated, becoming harmful to the health, benefit, and welfare of the community, creates a fire hazard, and would benefit from demolition. It would order the removal of the structure on or before June 18th with completion by July 31st, 2025. The city has not requested formal bids, which would normally be required if demolition would occur, but we have gotten bids informally in terms of getting quotes and estimates on, one, how much it would cost, and two, how long it would take, and we think that this is a reasonable time. And finally, it authorizes the city manager as the designee to solicit bids for the city to effectuate the building's removal if the owner fails to do it within that time, which I think that the city should be prepared to do if it comes to that. If this council adopts Resolution 24, this resolution, the city clerk will file a notice of dilapidation and lien with the county clerk. This does several things. One, it places a lien on the property, meaning that if we have to go in and eventually tear down the property after they fail to comply with the timeline given by the city, that the city will have a high priority lien against the property in the event that we need to recover costs of demolition. That is incredibly important. This is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars if the city is the one to demolish the property. Keep that in mind. If removed by the city, again, we will have a lien against the property for cost of removal co-equal with the lien of ad valorem taxes and shall be prior and superior to all other titles and liens against the property, right? The importance is, right, I think, we need to ensure that we recover our costs as the city of Norman if we abate the property. And I think this is also a reason to be skeptical of another request for a delay, which I guarantee they will give you. Because another delay, because I mean, the lien will be filed tomorrow, but an extension of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. 5 out of 20 of these properties are in foreclosure. Usually, what happens is the city, at that point, when we see a bankruptcy come in, and at that point, we're dealing with an automatic stay. And if that's the case, then we aren't going to be able to perfect a lien against the property, meaning that we're probably not going to be able to get demolition without a lot of time, energy, money potentially, in order to get a release from the automatic stay if the owner files bankruptcy. So, wanted to make the city aware that that is potentially a risk if another delay is coming. Because again, the pattern that we have noticed is that the owner will take measures, like it has repeatedly and repeatedly, to try to cause a delay whenever necessary. So, with that in mind, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have, and staff is available to answer any questions you have, more specifically in terms of fire, code, or permit.
With regard to liens, when you put that in there as co-equal to property taxes, that infers that there are property taxes owed on that building to some amount, and that we have equal chance at getting at whatever the pot of money is?
Correct. In terms of whenever you, and now I'm not, I'm going back to law school a little bit on this, but whenever, a property, let's say you have a lien, right? The priority of that lien in position to other liens is important, right? So, for example, if a property was sold and then the proceeds would go to whoever has a lien on the property, right, in order of priority. The city would have co-equal first priority, meaning that we would get paid before anyone else, which, if according to the testimony of the owner on May 20th, the property dirt, if you will, is worth $1 million. Again, if we're thinking, it's not going to be that much to, I don't think there are any outstanding property taxes on the property now, but that would more than cover our lien, so should the property go to foreclosure or anything like that.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Grant?
Yes, I was also curious about the lien aspect. Thank you very much for all this evidence. I was looking at the transcript with the failures to secure loans. I kind of think the construction loan being what would fix it or potentially bring it down if they haven't been able to get it. I think we're looking at a situation that if we did order removal, we would be paying for it. And the outlook on that sounds like it could be a couple years if we see anything, if we end up in that.
It's a lot of factors that could depend on, yeah.
Okay, but years is also not a stretch to think about seeing that money come back to us.
Potentially.
Okay, appreciate it.
Councilmember Peacock?
Thanks. Following on the track of liens as well, the ones that had been filed in the past, are those still standing, or have they been reconciled?
I believe in the foreclosure action, all of them were named. I believe Powerlift did disclaim their interest in the property. I don't know specifically what the status of those are, why they were even filed. There could be a very legitimate business reason for why those were filed. I have no idea. But other than that, I think I know of at least one, and don't quote me on this, but it is my recollection that at least one went to small claims action and was later settled and released.
Okay. Do we know if there's been any testing for asbestos or lead paint, lead pipes, any kind of remediation efforts that would need to be undertaken in addition to renovation?
I do remember in the hygienist report them talking about asbestos on the property. I'm not, but I would rely, I think, on Janita. I don't know if there has been, at least not by us, no.
And then in the discussions that we've had on this most recent permit, have we seen any kind of line item budget for what the proposed work might entail, and if the proposed amount is adequate to perform that work?
Say that one more time.
Like, with the building permit, usually you provide a set of plans.
Yes.
And with that, a budget of the work, a line item cost estimate of this much goes to concrete, this much goes to steel, this much goes to the roof. Just really to say, all items are accounted for in the budget. We have an adequate amount of money to complete the project. Because securing a loan is one thing, but securing an adequate loan is a whole nother conversation.
Yes, and I know usually we do get a construction amount, Greg. We have an estimated cost of construction. Because I don't know if, I think they're still in process of getting bids from contractors, so I'm not sure if they know how much it would be. So, do you have anything to add, Greg?
My apologies, I didn't actually record the proposed construction values for them. I could probably go get that for you real quick if that was a critical piece of information, but.
I'm just curious if what they're trying to secure from the bank is going to be enough to fulfill the.
Right,
project.
and normally in the permitting process, we don't really do analysis of construction cost estimating. It's not usually actually became a building official to get away from that.
I didn't know since there was such a negotiation or back and forth between.
But yeah, in this case, that's probably a more pertinent piece of information, so.
I appreciate it.
And I believe they'll be able to speak to that somewhat.
Before the mayor calls the next speaker, I'm having trouble hearing you all. I don't know that, I keep messing with your mics, but try to speak into your microphone a little closer.
Councilmember Holman, you get to show us how.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple questions to clarify real quick. So as ordered in May, they had to put up new fencing and have a 24-hour security guard. Is that still in place today?
I probably not. It was, I think, a condition of the injunction that was placed on in early May on the property. And again, the fence was repaired within the 10. I don't know if it was within the 10 days of the court's order, but I think the fence has been repaired. And then we have, as far as we can tell, 24-hour security has been on site. Now, if you notice in the testimony of the owner on May 20th, they have noted several instances where people have tried to gain access to the property, including the 2 minor children. And I would also keep in mind this, if this gets any media attention or anything like that, I think what you should be prepared for is some people trying to access the property knowing that it will not be there potentially in the coming future. So keep that in mind, that it could continue to be a risk or a greater risk moving forward.
Okay. And then given that this has been an ongoing issue, why would you say has it not risen to the council level for a decision to abate it before now?
I think that there are several reasons, and if I'll venture to speak for staff, but and also in terms of a prosecutor, I don't hardly ever get citations from code compliance, because our code compliance, as usually a rule, are very, very good about working with property owners to get to compliance, right? We do not try to be punitive. We try to work with the property owner to come up with solutions in order to remediate and bring into compliance. That's one reason, just as a general reason. The second reason is that we did understand during this time, and I think until we kind of figured out and saw the patterns that we were seeing, that, we didn't want to penalize or, put a hotel company in the middle of COVID in, the harsh straits, given the world as it was then, right? Unfortunately, as we have, come out of COVID, what we've seen is that, we have concerns that this will never reach completion. We're out of COVID. Other, hotels have been built during COVID within less time than their hotel was built, that they did build. So that's a second reason. I think a third reason, again, is because we kind of thought that we were getting somewhere a lot of the time. We thought that we were making progress. We would take a step forward, but then we'd take 2 steps back.
And Councilmember Holman, in April of 2024, in a conversation I'd had with an owner's representative who indicated that as soon as a certificate of occupancy was obtained on a new construction project here in Norman by the hotel group, that all energy and attention would be placed on the Norman Hotel. And a certificate of occupancy was issued in June of 2024, and we sat in silence. And reaching back out to an owner's rep, I was informed that, well, we've got 2 more projects we want to finish first, and then we're all yours. And you'll recall a study session we had with council about 2 properties. We were very concerned with this being one of them, and followed council's direction from that study session on the subject.
And again, I'd also add on to that, to harken back to a previous slide, we are not the only one tightening the screws, right? 5 out of 20 of their properties are currently in foreclosure, right? 1 has already been condemned by the city of Wichita Falls. I think that we are now competing for the property owner's attention that was difficult to get in the first place. So again, if we get past this hurdle, or if more time is given, what hurdle awaits them that they have to get over next somewhere else?
Okay. And my last question for staff, at least for right now. As a lawyer, you may not answer this if you don't think you can or should. But you showed pictures of like rusted I-beams in 2017, 18, that were structural members. And so was this building structurally sound when people were still staying there? Is a question I have based off that picture.
I'll let Greg answer that one, yeah.
So the rust that you saw on those columns, I took those pictures, by the way, that was a little bit later. So, I mean, they might have been evident, they were not visible. And so the earliest we were made aware was 2019. So there would have been no one staying in the building. It would have been already unoccupied, so no one was legally staying in there as an occupant at that time.
And rust like that, I mean, this is maybe speculation, but rust like that, severe, can form in 3 years?
You know, it's tough to say. I mean, you're right, that is very dramatic.
I mean, it looked like something that had been underwater for like
Correct.
years.
My observation of it was where those columns were were exterior under like an overhang facade, and they were in islands. So there was like a curbed island, you know, the size of this desk, and there was a couple columns in there. And those columns were below grade, and they would have seen weather, and they might have seen sprinkler systems as well. And so you had these columns, you know, 1 foot, 2 foot below the grade level, and then sprinklers. So I don't know that, based on the structural report that we've seen and what we see of those columns, we would be, yeah, if we thought that condition was present throughout the building, then there would be no building, right? Like that. So we did require, just as a clarification, he said this, but we did require, after discovery of those columns, repair of those columns, in our proceedings and conversations, just to put everybody's mind here, we did require that a structural review occur. We had some back and forth with them about what that really meant. You know, I'll be blunt and tell you, they tried to provide as little as they had to. We held their feet to the fire. They did get an engineer who's reputable, who went through, did an evaluation. The city had their own engineer who did a peer review of that report they provided. And based on that, it was determined that there didn't appear to be any other notable deficiencies that were that egregious as those columns.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mayor Hench.
Councilmember Dixon.
Oh, don't sit down, Greg. Is there any way you could guesstimate the number of hours that the Planning and Community Development Department has put into this one project since 14, 17, either one of those?
Considerable. Considerable. Janita's got staff, Code's had staff out there for years and years and years. It's got to be, I mean, just in the run-up to the proceeding today, you know, in the planning department, I would guess myself, probably 40, 50 hours just in the last 3-4 months. I'm guessing Janita's about the same. Our fire planning officer probably about the same, and that would be just from, we'll just say January 1.
So it would be fair to say that the city has invested significant amount of time and resources into this one project.
Oh, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to go back to 17, very significantly.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
All right, that's all the comments we have from council this time. I believe that we have a presentation by the applicant. So, Mr. Rieger, floor is yours.
Your Councilmember Peacock, Sean Rieger representing the applicant in this case. And, you know, we come here tonight, I've been at this podium for decades and have been here before when people have been condemned because of dilapidated properties. And I'm always an advocate of trying to work it out, trying to find a way. I hear all the history. I understand that. I live near this hotel. I understand that. But I'm always an advocate of let's try to make it work. Let's try to figure it out. When this case came to us a couple of weeks ago, we first called Rick and said, we need a little bit of time to figure this out. What can we do in this case? And Rick, I think, I'll paraphrase, I think said this is really the council's decision as to whether they want to give staff that time to work with it or not. And so we're here tonight to ask you to give us that time. You know, I would dispute some of what Anthony said in that, for instance, he said there was no improvements. Well, there have been improvements. There's a new roof on this building, for instance, just a couple of years old. The structural work was done on this building. There is a security guard sitting out there right now who actually ran off the project manager as he arrived from South Carolina tonight to be here. So there have been improvements. And in my experience of real estate and property law over the decades, I don't usually see people put over $1 million into a property unless they're really serious about trying to make it work. He's done that in the last couple of years with the roof and the structural work. Is it hard to get there? Absolutely. It's really hard to get there on large projects like this. It's really hard. I practiced architecture for 5 years before I was an attorney. I remember working on a project that was a rehabilitation of a large building. It's not easy figuring that out. It's not easy figuring out how you have to go back into a large property and figure out what you have to fix and how you have to fix it. It's not particularly easy getting financing, but it can be done. And I encourage you to give this a chance. Give us a chance to work through it for the next month with city staff. I hear the history, but you have his attention, clearly. You've brought him to this podium. And every time you've brought somebody to this podium on condemnation, you have let them go back and try to work through it. You have let them try to figure out with another opportunity. Every time that I remember. And those were houses. I don't remember a large building being taken down by the city ever in my time. That is an extraordinary step, extraordinary step. And I would remind you that Anthony told you that the statute said you can leave the building with required improvements. So let's work through what those required improvements are. Let's figure it out. I have a whole presentation to take you through, and I'll do that. But I wanted to make these initial comments after hearing all of that. You know, the other thing you have to think about is you do have an opportunity here. You have an opportunity here for a revival of a hotel. Have we exhausted every part of that opportunity? I don't think so yet. I know I haven't because I just got into this case. But I don't think you have either. I've seen a financing sheet. I've been shown it, a signed sheet from a financier to do this project. I've seen the building permit plans that are in City Hall right now to be issued. You just heard they would not issue them. Well, we can't get financing without a building permit. So it has to work together. So I would encourage you to let that happen. Let us figure it out. Give us a month to go deep into this project and figure it out and see if we can do it. This project is Zone C2. Have you thought about what happens after you take it down, after it goes to foreclosure, after you eliminate this site? What does it become? A used car lot? It's going to be something. It's going to be something on I-35. You have an opportunity with a plan that we could try to work through over the next month and put security behind it so that you're protected to see if he can get this done. I think I want you to get that chance so that you have the opportunity to have that done too. That's all we're asking for. Giving it one more chance, one more chance. Give him another month to work through it. We'll work closely with city staff and see if we can prove up the financing, prove up that the permit works, that it all can get done. Security is sitting there right now. Nobody's getting into that building. Our contractor literally was confronted and run off when he came here tonight onto that property because they didn't know who he was. So he had just flown in earlier tonight. So let me take you through the presentation and just show you sort of an outline of what we plan. You see the project there, it's 150 rooms, 6 stories next to the Rigo Hotel. At the end, it can be a full service hotel. Here's the operator. You've just been shown histories of all kinds of situations that are alleged. I would tell you, in operating a large corporation, there are a lot of times that corporations are involved in workout plans and foreclosures and things of that nature that maybe aren't particularly true as to one property, but are an issue elsewhere in the corporation. This operator does run 3 hotels successfully in Norman, Oklahoma, right around this site. You have that opportunity to work on another project with him. These hotels are right around here. They're all successful. They're all operating right now. And you can see them in the near location, the Holiday Inn, the Residence Inn, the Hilton Garden Inn, just to the south of it. He's intimately familiar with this area. He's familiar with the Oklahoma hospitality industry. He operates out of Durant, Oklahoma, has a long history in Oklahoma of many hotels. He's committed to make this one work. But it will be hard. There's no question. This will be hard. But if you give him a chance, he can work through it. So there is background to this project. It has a new roof. It has a long-term warranty. It has a new exterior finish. I want you to think about some of those fixtures you were shown. The exterior wall was falling off. He put a new finish on it. It's there. The structural was redone. It's fixed. The roof is fixed. He re-insulated the exterior. Since 2020, he's put about $1.5 million into the physical improvements of the project. So I disagree that there's been no improvements. There has been. He's made progress. This is actual progress. This is 2018, there was an internal flood. There was insurance claims, and you can go onto OSCN and find those claims. There was disputes about insurance. I can tell you, I've had many clients who had disputed with insurance, hail claims, and all kinds of things. You would be amazed at what the insurance industry will deny in a building claim. I've litigated those projects. It's amazing. There are legitimate reasons that should be litigated in an insurance denial. They did that for a couple of years. So that delayed this project. They went on with the structural engineer. They fixed that. The EFS contract was fixed in 2022. The exterior work was substantially complete in 2023. That then required new architectural, new engineering. Those plans are there at City Hall right now. I've seen them. They're contingent on financing to get those plans approved by you. But once you do that, the financing, I've seen the sheet. If we could work with city staff, show them all of that, and you can have your city staff vet it, and we can see if this project has a real chance. It's structurally sound at this point. You heard your staff members say that. It's my understanding that the engineering has shown it to be structurally sound. It's ready for completion. It's basically ready for rehabilitation. I would encourage you too to think through the photos when you saw the graffiti and so forth. I've seen many construction sites that start in that look, but that's not indicative of it not being ready to start on a project. There's been significant recent project. The permit was submitted, $15 million financing sheet. I've seen it. It's signed. It's a lengthy sheet, about 13 pages of detailed provisions as to how the loan would be provided. There was municipal code violations that were submitted to this owner. All of them have been satisfied, and we confirmed that all of them were satisfied. The fence was one of them. The fence was repaired and put back up. The security guard was one of them. It's there. So there is protections right now in place as we stand tonight to protect the property from any kind of a situation like that. So we need the permits. We need the permits to be issued. If we get the permits issued, we get the financing, and then we're ready to go. Let us show you all of that. Let us show you in good faith at a sit-down table between us and your staff and prove it all up. If we can't, then we can't. But if we can, you have the opportunity to have a project revitalized and put back into operation. That's the permit status. They've talked about it. There were a few permits issued, but the overall building permit has not been issued. It still sits there. And my understanding was that it would not be issued as long as condemnation proceedings were active, that they would not issue the permit without basically your blessing to go back and proceed with that permit issuance. There's the financing options. There's two options, actually. One of them is $15 million. We have an executed term sheet May 9th. Basically, it is for full interior renovations, code compliance, MEP, elevators, fire suppression, everything. I would encourage you, you talked about, is it enough money? That's really the banker's call. And the bankers certainly will do that very closely. I think bankers are pretty renowned for looking closely at a project and deciding whether the money is enough to do the project. I don't know a lot of bankers that will just half loan a project and leave it out there half done. They'll look at it very closely. If the bankers believe that it's legitimate, typically they'll loan the money. If the banker wants that property owner to bring more equity to it, more initial deposits, they'll force him to do that. I'm not aware they've done that in this case, but if the bank believes it's short, or if the construction bidding comes back short after the permit is sufficiently vetted, then the bank will say, bring more money, and that will be his issue. But you can see all that. So he's ready to go. That project, that financing is ready to go. The second option he's working on, there is another term sheet that is provided by a local investment bank, or local bank, that he's worked with before and has a long relationship with. That is $18 million. I've seen that sheet as well. That one is less advanced. The first one is fully advanced with a signed term sheet. The second one is more of a initial term sheet. But he has those in hand, ready to proceed. The fire suppression system would be put back as the first order of business. That would be the first thing put back into place, is the fire suppression. But again, we've already done some of the current conditions. We've completed the fencing, the security, we've cleared the structure. All of that was completed so that we've reacted each time to the immediacy of what was requested. We now simply need to go forward. He needs an opportunity. Every time somebody stood at this podium on a condemnation, you've given them one last chance. I don't remember a time you haven't done that. I remember every time you've done that. We're requesting you to do that again. Give him one more chance. Absolutely, we'll address all the fire marshal concerns, the life safety concerns. We know that that's the biggest issue of priority. And that's what's planned right away, right at the outset. So we ask for you to postpone this. What we're asking for is that you let us work with staff, give us 30 days. And then if we proceed on the project, we're happy to come back every 60 days in front of you. Show you what we've done, what we haven't done. Put us under accountability, no problem. We understand the importance of that. But let him have an opportunity to do it. I've always advocated for property rights. I've always advocated for people to have a right to make it work, and a lot of times it's hard. A lot of times it's really hard on commercial projects to make it work. But give a property owner every chance to make it work, particularly so long as they are protecting the public from the property, which he is doing tonight, the fencing, the security. So long as he is doing that, given an opportunity to continue through to get the project done. We've proposed, this is something on the order of what we would work through with staff and propose and put deadlines on it, that if we didn't meet those deadlines, then you can proceed. But something on the order of the building walkthrough with contractor, that's already done. All bids from contractors must be submitted. They have those coming in the next couple of days. June 18th is the deadline they've put on those contractors. Award of construction services, July 21, that really is contingent upon the permit. You have to issue the permit, or we can't go forward without that. Financing option goes in hand once we get the permit and we award the construction. Begin the temporary fire suppression work probably early to mid-August. Then we proceed with your check-ins, and we do your check-ins throughout the project. You check in with us at every turn. Construction start date, once you go through all of that, is probably early October for a project of this caliber. Construction complete, probably early to mid-27. And then the property opening date in 27. 2 years for a project of this caliber. But we're ready to proceed, and if we could put that kind of a time frame with benchmarks into basically a term sheet with your city staff and put us under that accountability, then we proceed. If we're victorious and we finish this project, you get a new project. And I think you get a pretty good project. If we move forward, there's new capital, there's new comprehensive plans, all of that. And what you get to, and you have a premier owner here that has worked in the area, but you get to basically a Marriott hotel. We have a license agreement signed for this property, ready to go forward with Marriott. We'll show that to you. You can see it. Just imagine that you have another Marriott hotel, and the one they have signed is the Delta brand. Learned a lot about Marriott's, but basically Delta is in the premium line. You see it right there. Sheraton, Meridian, Westin. You see that second line is where Delta is the level of hotel that you're looking at, a full-service hotel under the Marriott Delta brand. That is licensed, and that agreement is in place. If we can move forward, that is what is planned. So we share your goal. We share your goal of moving forward to get this complete, to make this a complete project. He's committed to that. And if he can't fulfill that, then we understand the public's concern that you have to face the issues of whether it's dilapidated. But again, I encourage you to consider the dilapidation that says tear it down or require improvements. Improvements to make it safe for the public, improvements that would help it advance towards a completed project. We're prepared to do that. So give us that time. Let us set a term sheet. Let us set a term sheet that shows you a path with accountability of benchmarks, show you proof of financing, give you regular check-ins, and we're happy to post a line of credit or a bond that basically backs that up. I can't stand here tonight and hand that to you. That's why we need 30 days to work through all of these issues. But I've seen a letter that basically says we're prepared to give that line of credit for that bond. That was delivered to me today. So we have all of this ready to go, set into place. But we need time. Staff has basically shut down on us by saying we're done. And it's basically told me, as Rick did a couple weeks ago, to appeal to you. And so it's your decision whether to give him one final opportunity or not. If you don't, then we go back to the courts. The banks go back to the courts. We all go back to the courts. If you do, then you have some control. You have some ability to work with him to see if he can really come through with the financing, if he can really deliver the project as he wishes to and as he commits to. But that's what we asked for. So I didn't come here tonight to litigate that book. We can do that later in court if we need to. We can go out and get under the rules of evidence where what is really relevant is put on the screen, stuff that isn't. We can do all that. But we're here tonight just with a simple request. Pause this for 30 days. Let us work with city staff to show them all of these details and work through the project. That's our request. It's that simple. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time.
I guess the one issue I have is trust. And over the last, well, at least for 3 years for me, for 10 years with the city, there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of built trust. And I see the pretty girl here, but will she dance? And what happens if she won't? And so what are we going to do if all of a sudden after 30 days you say 30 days more or whatever? To go right back into condemnation, redo this whole thing, to me seems a waste of time. What is a guarantor for the city that your client will be able to do what he proposes here?
Basically, as I've said, that we would enter into an agreement with your city staff that would show you the benchmarks, the timeframes, and if we miss those timeframes, it's over. That we've basically failed. We're happy to put ourselves through that accountability. We understand the trust issue.
Yeah.
We hear it. We see it. But we would hope that you would see that the trust can go both ways if we commit ourselves to that form of accountability.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Grant?
Yes. I know this is a condemnation case, but I'll just point back to February 2024 when we did declare a house a nuisance in Ward 6, which was pretty rare for us. And given what I've seen of all the pictures in this helpful little packet, I would say the first part of that is pictures. How do you not see this as a nuisance property that has all kinds of issues? You're talking about a roof. Anthony mentioned it. I heard that in his presentation. But the current condition today suggests that it was August 29th, 2017, the email that was provided said that we are taking the issues and letters from the City of Norman and Fire Marshal very seriously with the intention to act quickly and aggressively as possible. And in that timeline I saw, there was nothing quick and aggressive with dealing with these issues. And then to Anthony's point about thinking about firefighters on that second floor, that's absolutely not. Like, you're asking us to trust that somebody won't die in the time it takes you to fix this. So, and I'm not hearing that you've actually secured financing either. Is that correct?
I've seen the term sheet that is signed that is basically an offer of financing that he's willing to agree to, yes.
And then to Councilmember Peacock's point about is there asbestos in it, I went into tab 40. It is water and mold damage assessment. Number 5 is limitations. It talks about some units that were not accessible for assessment. It says no asbestos testing was performed. However, impacted substrate scheduled for removal must be sampled asbestos content prior to demolition activities. So, like, to Anthony's point about what if there are other setbacks, do you have financing to cover asbestos removal if they find asbestos? Is that in the term sheet?
It's part of, I don't think it's specifically in the term sheet. The term sheet deals with building permits, basically, the construction permit of work. Oftentimes in buildings, there's asbestos. That would not be unusual that we encounter asbestos. I'm working on another project right now that has asbestos removal.
Can
That's
I
usually
ask
part
how
of the
much
work.
they got in financing?
15 million and 18 million
And what exactly is each for?
for the totality of the work, for the building.
In what order? Like, you showed us the timeline, right?
Yeah.
You get, in theory, the financing option goes into effect in August of 25.
Correct.
If you want to go back to the timeline, we could put it
Yes.
so everybody's following along.
Happy to. Yeah.
So we're supposed to trust from now until August 12th that there won't be kids, or, because we're drawing attention to this issue, that this is going to be okay. Like, if somebody dies in there in between now and then, this, you know, we trusted that this would be fixed. That's just an unfortunate accident. I mean, that looks bad for council, because we know what the conditions are inside here. Or if a firefighter falls, we know what the conditions are inside here. And nowhere does it say you're going to put up railing or anything to address the unsafe issues on the second floor.
We are unable to do work on this project until you issue those permits. We're not allowed to work on a construction project until you issue those permits. If you issue those permits, we would immediately move in and work on the life safety issues.
Again, I have not seen anything that suggests that there will be quick and aggressive action. So, man, I just think it's kind of a money sink for the city, honestly. And I'll yield to whoever has questions.
Councilmember Holman?
Thank you. So I think a question that a lot of folks might have about this, given the difficult, or the history and the difficulty that the owner has had with, you know, being able to make a few things here and there, but being able to actually accomplish an overall restoration or reopening it is there any reason why, given the problems with the building, the age of it, why it's not more ideal to just tear it down and rebuild a new hotel that's modern and has modern features that a hotel would have today?
Yeah, actually,
Instead of trying to fix all these mold and you know, all this whole.
yeah. Well, it's a large building. There's a lot of significant work in this property that is salvageable. And we've actually seen a lot of hotels around the country rehabbed and revitalized. That's actually not that uncommon. I've not been in the details of the numbers, so I haven't run a comparison, of course, to compare what it would be under a new build versus a remodel. But I will tell you, I've seen many projects that are remodeled and revitalized from what it was. That's not unusual.
Sure, you know, with this one though, I'd say it's not a historic building. It's not a building that really probably means anything to anybody in Norman, probably. I mean, you know, everybody has stories and experiences, I'm sure, but it's not a building I don't see anybody fighting to save or saying, no, that's an important building in Norman's history and we need to make sure it stays. And I think you often see buildings get restored or turned into hotels, or old hotels fixed up because they are in historic areas, or they're a building that people really care about, or something like that. And so that's kind of, with this one, it's just a hotel off the highway. It's got a big parking lot around it. It's next to a movie theater and a lot of restaurants and entertainment stuff. So I was just wondering why go through all this effort and seemingly a lot of difficulty to try to fix up an old building. And there are reasons I can think of why you would want to. I mean, I have concern about demolishing a building of this size and every piece of that going into the landfill, and just like we don't need any more of that. And so when it's possible to reuse a building or fix up a building and put new life into it, I definitely prefer that. But I just wasn't sure what the owners. It seems like it would have been an easier path to level this site and build something newer or a modern hotel, given that it's not a historic building that has any kind of features to it that people really are attached to.
Yeah, and I think that decision was probably made when he replaced the roof and when he did the structural refurbishment. That strikes me pretty significantly. Why would you do that if you weren't committed to the project? Why would you put $1.5 million into a property in recent 2 or 3 years if you weren't committed to trying to make it work? If you weren't committed to really proceeding forward with that project? I don't know why he would have done that. He could have chosen not to and let the bank take it back. He didn't. So I think he's already shown you clearly through $1.5 million that he's willing to go forward on it.
And, I mean, I know you just got hired on this case, so, I mean, I think the question for us would be why now and not before? Why have you not been hired, and this plan and this timeline and things like that put forward? I know that maybe you may not be in a position to answer that for them, but we would wonder, like, why get to this point where the city is finally bringing it to city council after all these years, which is doesn't happen very often.
Right.
Is rare, is not something I think any of us like to do or want to do, in most cases, I would say. So why now, I guess?
I don't know, but we made an intentional decision tonight, I did, to not litigate the past and not get into what's happened in the past. Again, we can and we will in other forums if we go back to court. But this is just simply, do we want to move forward together and try to make it work or not? That's really the goal tonight. And if you don't, then we'll go fight that book out in court and do what we have to do with the banks and everybody else. But that's not what we're here to do tonight. We're here to just say, let's try it one last time, just as you've done every time with a condemnation person that stood at this podium. You've given it one last shot. Give it one last shot.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hinkle?
So the current loan on this property is being foreclosed on, correct?
I believe so, yeah. I think the banker attorney is here.
And to approximately what amount is that foreclosure?
I don't know off the top of my head. This is the bank's representative, right?
I'll wait for her response, please.
I would guess, but it's been a long day.
Are we browsing OSCN for this information?
I'm pulling up my copy on my phone, but it is
Okay.
also available on OSCN.
If you'd please come up.
As of May 5th, 2025, the principal amount related just to the Norman property is right about 5.5 million.
Okay, so you said just to the Norman property, so this property is currently cross-collateralized with another property?
The loan is cross-collateralized with a hotel in Lawton as well.
Okay, so of this $15 to $18 million that's been signed on a term sheet, do you guys expect your mortgages on those two properties to be paid off from those proceeds?
I will let counsel for the borrower answer that because I believe there's separate financing with respect to the Lawton property that may be in addition to the amounts that are being spoken of with the 15 to 18.
So the Lawton property is not with your bank?
It is, but we're not involved in the refinancing. There's an outside entity who is looking at financing and paying our loans off.
That's my question.
Yes.
Yes, of the proceeds of the loan terms that we're seeing in between 15 and 18 million dollars, you guys expect your mortgage to be paid off?
If they were able to obtain the financing that's being proposed tonight, yes,
Okay, so.
more than sufficient.
On the Norman property, the amount is again,
5.5.
and on the Lawton property, the amount is?
That is separately secured by the Lawton property, and the defaulted amount on that $7.1.
So we're at $13 million in default right now?
Yes, and again, I would defer to borrower's counsel with respect to, I believe there's separate financing being sought for
That's
Lawton.
not what I'm asking. My question is if there is going to be a new bank that assumes the mortgages on this property, then the old mortgages are gonna have to be satisfied, and that means your bank will be paid off from the proceeds of any new financing that comes on these properties, correct?
That would be our hope, yes.
So if we're saying that we're requesting $18 million in financing, but there's give or take $13 million that have to go to satisfy the first mortgage on two properties, then really we're looking at about $5 million worth of renovation costs.
The Lawton loan is not secured by the Norman property. The Norman loan, I would draw this out for you. The Norman loan is secured by the Lawton property. So if the financing comes in just with respect to the Norman property, the lot in one won't affect that. It's the opposite. Does that make sense?
So it's 5 point whatever million dollars will come off the top, so it reduces the actual capital amount that's going into the renovation of the
Correct.
property.
Yes, so the remaining amount, it would be my understanding, would be used towards the proposed construction and renovation.
So, and that's in the term sheet that you've seen, Mr. Rieger?
Ma'am, before you go, I need to get your name, please.
Certainly. Elizabeth George, and I represent First Bank and Trust.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would probably be part of the closing council member, right? But she's correct that the lot and property is not involved in this. And so there's separate financing, separate lenders, separate loans, separate everything. So it's only the Norman loan.
Well, I just think it's clear that we don't misrepresent this as an $18 million renovation when $6 million is coming off the top to satisfy a previous mortgage that's been defaulted and
Yeah.
that's being foreclosed on right now.
Yeah, $5 million roughly.
Okay. You had mentioned a bond. What type of bond are we talking about?
We would put up a bond from an insurance company, and we had proposed an amount of $500,000 to put up to basically cover your condemnation.
Is this a performance bond or a surety bond or?
I haven't seen the particulars of it, other than I would just say it would be a bond to back, basically a term sheet that we would come to an agreement with you on.
Do we know who the bond issuer is going to be?
I saw a letter earlier today. It was an insurance company, a bonding insurance company. I don't remember the name of it, but we would provide that with you.
Will the bond be paid in full up front, or will there be payments made on the bond as it progresses?
Not sure, the bond wouldn't be pulled by the city until there was a default.
No, I mean,
But-
in order to get a bond, you have to pay for the bond, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So will
it
that
would be.
bond be paid by your client?
Correct.
In full upfront, or will there be payments made by that?
The bond would be executable to you upfront.
So we'll be an obligee of the bond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The original construction loan on this property was $15 million, and right now we have $5 million that's being foreclosed on. I'm curious as to where that $5 million was advanced. I've heard you mention the roof and some structural things, but really by my calculations of what you've described, we're at about maybe $2-3 million in that. So I'm curious as to where, from the bank that has provided the money and that balance that is owed on that loan, how those advances were made with no performance on the property being made for a construction loan, where there's not really, I mean, yes, we've replaced a roof, but a roof can be taken care of partially by insurance too, which maybe we'll find that out later. But how is that loan advanced with no performance up to $5 million?
Our bank actually bought out, refinanced a prior finance, so that is actually, that's not primarily construction costs. That's primarily the balance from the loan that the bank originally refinanced when it took this loan on in 2017, 2019. I can't remember the exact date, but there was already a loan on the property at that time, and so that balance is about maybe even a little bit less
Okay,
than.
what was the purpose of the construction mortgage being filed? If it was just a mortgage, then it could have just been a modification, right, if there was one previously on file?
The bank had a line of credit significantly above the 5.5 to allow them to do the construction. I don't want to litigate that issue here, but there were funds above and beyond that to be used towards construction. But right now, the balance is only about 5.5.
I guess the gist of my question is, was the financing for this project used to cash flow other projects that the applicants have?
I couldn't speak to that issue, but I did want to let you know that that was the primary balance of that was the payoff of the loan that got refinanced with our bank.
Okay.
Councilman, I asked the client that today. You had mentioned that to me earlier, and it's my understanding that no, that did not happen.
Okay.
But these are questions I don't mind getting into in details with staff, and that would be maybe something that happens going forward over the next month, is that those questions are asked and answered back and forth in detail.
Well, and that's why I asked the question about the bond, because I think about the amount of money that we've spent on city staff to do things with this property. I think about the amount of money that we've sent for emergency resources to go out and mitigate drugs and trespassing and all of those resources. And so I'm curious if those things will be included in whatever type of bond we have here, because we're not just talking about us having to pay for a building to be demolished or however that ends up going. We're talking about the time that we've spent and the resources that we've spent for your client to not maintain a property that we have been actively trying to work with them on for 10 years. And I'm all about second chances and all of that stuff, but 10 years is a lot of chances. Has your client ever successfully completed a rehab project of this size before with their other hotels? Has that ever happened, or has it all just been new construction?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but happy to get into these questions and answer all.
In order to find out the answer to all of these questions that I have right now, I have to vote to postpone this for 30 days. Is that what you're telling me?
No, Councilmember, if I know the answer, I'm happy to give that to you, but I don't know the answer to that question.
All right, I'm good.
Councilmember Dixon?
I was going to ask the size of the building, or is it about 100,000 square feet?
I don't recall. Do you know the size of that building offhand? Actually, let me ask, Darwin, come on up and talk to me that.
And I just need just kind of for rough numbers here. I was just looking at, you know, a $15 million loan with a, you know, 100,000 square foot. That's $150 a square foot.
And let me introduce Darwin Bromley. He's the construction manager on this project. So he's been looked at this project closely, and maybe he could answer these kind of questions.
Would you spell your last?
Sure, it's Brumley, B-R-U-M-L-E-Y.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect. I'm on the right track then. So
Yeah, we're about 109,000 square feet.
okay, we'll just use simple math because I'm simple, and the numbers will work out in your favor. But we're looking well, it's even so. We're talking about if you get $15 million in financing, give the bank $5 million, so you've got $10 million to renovate 109,000 square feet. So we're looking at $100 a square feet cost to renovate. You can't build a home in Norman for that. You can't renovate a home for that. And we're talking about commercial construction, which should be more expensive than residential construction. So I'm not sure that there's even a good plan to get there. Does my statement or question kind of make sense, or like what?
To a degree. I mean, residential construction, in my experience, is much more expensive than commercial. But commercial, in this particular project, we have a budget of 10.7. We have an RFP, a request for proposal, that went out to contractors about a month ago. They're all due tomorrow. So tomorrow will be a tell for us if our 10.7 is a bust. We're not anticipating it to be, but tomorrow will definitely be a tell for us.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
This is not, Mr. Knighton, were you asking a question? I saw the finger go up, but I didn't hear the voice.
Yeah, and I want to try to answer your question that you were asking about financing. This is actually the second foreclosure on this property. There was a foreclosure in 2014, and that loan amount, the principal amount of that loan was $9 million. There was also a companion foreclosure of a couple of hotels in Texas, and the way that that case was resolved, it was resolved in mediation. So both the Oklahoma case and the Texas case were resolved in mediation with regard to that foreclosure action. In 2017, First Bank and Trust loaned the owner in excess of $8 million for the purpose of rehab. I don't know what that total amount was, but what I do know is that in 2021, $8 million, a little over $8 million was refinanced because they couldn't meet the timelines for that particular project. And they were loaned an additional $7.75 million in 2021, I guess in addition to assist them with moving forward with regard to completing the construction. So that was in 2021. And then, of course, you now jump to 2025 where you have this foreclosure action. Again, if you look at the documents from that case, the $15 million number comes from the refinanced 8 plus the 7.75. And then it appears as if that $15 million number has been reduced to about 5, which is what you have outstanding in that current foreclosure action with regard to this particular hotel.
So multiple banks have taken a risk to finance the rehab of this building,
At least 2,
and both of those banks have foreclosed.
correct.
And now the thing that's holding them back from getting more financing is the city issuing permits?
That's Mr. Rieger's understanding.
Okay.
That's it, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, sir. This is an opportunity for members of the public to make comments regarding this item. Remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up?
We do have one person signed up, Stephen Ellis. Okay.
Okay. Any final comments from council regarding this item? Yes, sir.
In the event that we grant them 30 days or 60 days or whatever, and this is actually a question for Rick or Anthony, or feel free to answer, and we have a bond in place that protects us for some dollar amount, and the client in question here decides to file bankruptcy or something along those lines, are we still protected with that bond surety, or will that go away too? Will that go towards?
I think the answer is probably not, because there would be an automatic stay with regard to any enforcement efforts. You have the issue with First Bank and Trust, so you'd have multiple outstanding issues, legal issues with regard to a multitude of parties, and more likely than not, we would be stayed with regard to moving forward with regard to any, I guess, financial issues with regard to that particular entity.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Holman, did you have a question?
No question, just
Statement.
a comment. I mean, this, I think there's a pretty, this is a pretty overwhelming amount of evidence about the current story of this and the condition. I do have concern that others have expressed about the safety of this structure for the public and for emergency responders too. I also have, as I mentioned before, reservation about demolition of a building this structure, of this size, and waste and all that stuff. And that we have typically given at least one opportunity when it has made it to the level of city council voting to condemn something outside of a criminal issue, which I think is what we're looking at mostly with that house that we did last year. And so I would really, ideally, I would love to see this building get restored and turned back into a 150-room hotel, because we all know that we need more hotel rooms. It would be ideal to be able to accomplish that without having to build a new structure. So I've felt inclined to support a 30-day postponement on this one to do what you said. But I would say that if we were to grant it, there would be no, in my view, and I won't speak for the current council members or incoming council members and what they might think about it, but I would seriously doubt there would be any further leniency or extension beyond that point. And even if an action was taken that was a stay, if that were to happen, I would be willing to guess that this council would not be willing to grant anything in the future regarding this property. So, if it comes to that point. So, I would propose a motion that we postpone this for 30 days specifically, that it could be the process that you specifically outlined is undertaken with city staff. And if it is not satisfactory by that 30-day deadline, then I think the council would vote to condemn. And if some other interceding action like bankruptcy or whatever halts our ability to move forward, again, I don't foresee there being a future path that council would approve something potentially. So I don't know, and that's future councils, and I don't know what anybody would think, but that's kind of where I'm standing right now, and so I would propose motion.
Would you wait on your motion until after we're out of the public hearing? Then we'll take
Okay,
motions
sure.
to
Perfect.
change that. But I agree with you, by the way. So, next. Councilmember?
Yeah, my final comment is whether we vote to postpone, which I won't support because I don't want this on my conscience, and 10 years is plenty of time to get right. I will also be voting no when we do vote on it, however it takes its form. Thanks.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion second. Motion on the floor is to close the public hearing. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have, and the vote is unanimous. The public hearing is now closed.
Thank you, ma'am. Motion to adopt the resolution. Councilmember Holman?
Postpone for exactly 1 month. So, I don't know what, that would be our second council meeting in July or what?
30 days, council member would actually be the 17th of July, which is a Thursday. It would be more likely that, if you want to give them the full 30 days, that the 22nd, which would be the next council meeting, be the one.
22nd of July, 25.
Yep.
Until July 22nd, 2025, our regularly scheduled council meeting for that evening.
Okay. Motion on the floor is to postpone until July 22nd, 2025. Do I hear a second? Was that a second? Motion dies for lack of second. I have some questions about what we've got in here. It says, structures are into the health, directing the removal of the structure and establishing the date in which the work shall be completed by the owner and authorizing the city manager to take steps to cause the work to be completed by the city if not completed by the owner. Mr. Knighton, are we giving the city manager a blank check to do all that, or do we need to set those dates?
I think you need to set it by vote. It says no later than 30 days. So
Pull your mic down.
the ordinance says no later than 30 days, so I think council needs to specifically direct that that be the time period, with the understanding that under state law, the owner has 30 days to file an appeal with the district court if they chose to do that, so it's probably going to impact that anyway. But per the ordinance, it should be no later than 30 days after the hearing.
So do I add that as a sentence on the, well, I'll have to get an amendment, or do I need an amendment?
No,
No, it wasn't seconded yet.
you have a motion and what do you want to do?
Yeah, 2, 7, that was 2, what am I doing, 7, 17? Yes, sir.
We have sounds like regardless of a postponement or anything, there's some kind of decision within 30 days that have to happen, correct? Is there a possibility that we could have a study session in 30 days if there is new information within that time frame versus having a public hearing, not taking a vote, but then that way we can
rattle it out. There is, as far as I'm
Are you asking if you could have a study session before the 30 days was up? Because
No.
that certainly can happen. If you want to have a study session, instead of bringing it back on a council docket in 30 days, that's what the motion needs to be.
What I want to see is if there's a 30-day time frame for before anything happens by our decision anyway, then in 30 days, we have a study session to see what work has been done, term sheets, plans. I mean, I get that we have to be able to issue permits.
Then you want what Mr. Rieger's asking for. Is that correct?
I mean, how does that work with us? Can we,
Clarification, the state statute in terms of appeal is 30 business days,
okay,
so it'll be closer to 45.
okay.
Mr. Rieger?
If I may, Councilmember, I just want you to be aware, I appreciate that, but if you vote to condemn tonight, it's over. There's no way he could get financing. I mean, it would be a public statement of such magnitude that there's no way he can go get financing at that point. So the term sheet becomes irrelevant. So I just want you to be aware of that. That basically ends the project and spins it off into litigation, basically. So
I mean,
just be aware of
I
that.
share the sentiment of Councilmember Holman where, you know, Norman is facing a shortfall of hotel rooms, and it would be nice to be able to renovate this one to reactivate it as a 150-key hotel right on I-35. But, you know, in the same vein, I'm having a hard time having good faith in this project moving forward with, you know, and we're not here to debate the history, but obviously we have to consider that as representatives of the city.
Mr. Purenton?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something real quick in terms of whether or not permits will be issued within 30 days. Keep in mind, they've applied for a permit. There's a permit review process. Even if, 30 days was granted, that does not guarantee permits would be issued within that 30 days. There's usually a back and forth period for corrections and comments. So if the intent is to, 30 days, I don't think 30 days may not be sufficient. So I don't know specifically if the request is more to get the permits so that they can get financing, or to enter into an agreement satisfactory with the city in order to get into a place where we can do that. But just wanted to clarify that 30 days likely will not be enough if the goal is to get permits, as pointed out by planning staff.
I see multiple parties here. There's people who are invested in owning a business in Norman. There's a bank that's looking to get paid, or they're gonna take a loss. There's our resources being spent in order to protect the public from a dilapidated eyesore that has really become a focal point of everybody driving south into Norman for a decade now. So is there any alternative equitable way that we can potentially work with all parties to explore options that are beneficial for the parties involved beyond postponement of 30 days that gets us really nothing? I mean, if there would be a stay on the bond, then that makes the bond invalid in my eyes. If that were something that were to happen, and if you have multiple properties that are being foreclosed on, and I don't have a balance sheet to see loan to value on those properties, then I don't know how close we are financially with a foreclosure or a bankruptcy with the clients that Mr. Rieger is representing. I would like to give the benefit of the doubt because I want that project to come back online. But I'm having a really hard time.
Well, the three options that I see here are you can reject, amend, and that would be to find that magic metal that you're looking for, whether that's a 30-day, well, it can't be a 30-day. We can't get there by 30. 60-day. But maybe by 60 days. Okay. Some number until they can get term permits, or postpone the resolution altogether. And that goes floating. I understand your angst.
What benefit do we get to amending it from that, Mr. Knighton? Is that something that you can address, or Anthony? I mean, if we were, instead of postpone, if we were to amend it in some way, is there any language that would actually give the city protection for anything that could happen between now and then, or are we just spinning our wheels?
Part of the difficulty for us, and it really is Mr. Purington that came up with the issue, had to do with securing the building. Because at the time we had the hearing, you saw the pictures of the fence. I mean, there were obviously places where you could really access the property really easily. There was no security at the property, which obviously left it to anybody that wanted to go in there could access it. At the hearing, the court made part of the injunction the actual providing of the 24/7 security and also repairing the fence. And I've driven by there a couple of times. I've seen the guy in the parking lot providing security, and I've also noticed that the fence, at least the places where it was dilapidated, appears to have been repaired. We've talked about the issue of, that injunction was contingent upon appointing a receiver. There was a hearing for that. The receiver did not get appointed. The judge did advise at that time that he was going to allow, it was supposed to be in effect, the injunction was supposed to be in effect for 30 days of the date of that order. He did go ahead and allow it to remain in effect for the additional 30 days, which expired earlier this month, which gave us the ability to have this hearing. Because they do have a right to appeal, and this kind of sort of goes back to what we talked about a little bit before, an amendment that might be able to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish is to amend the effective date of the condemnation order. So if you were to amend it to say that it would become effective as of 30 business days from today, I don't know what Mr. Rieger thinks about that issue in terms of the ability to proceed forward with determining whether you can get financing under those
That's
circumstances.
essentially a postponement anyway, right?
Yes, but you wouldn't have to come back. I mean, it would be essentially it would be, but you would not have to come back to have this issue again. Again, if sufficient information were not provided within that time period, it would just go into effect.
So what would constitute sufficient information in that?
That would be what you're looking for. I mean,
If I may, Councilman Wright, financing clearly is at the heart of this. It's at the heart, it seems, to everybody's questions, and we're happy to provide that. I think what I want to say is, as Mr. Knighton said, is the fence is in place, the security is in place. That's my understanding. I'm happy if we go look at the boarding of the building and make sure there's no entry points. I think that's in place right now, as far as I understand. The security, it seems like what is everybody's worried about, the biggest risk here. I think that is solvable immediately and is already in place. I think the fencing and the security is there. The question is the financing. Can we show that to you, improve that up in the next 30 days? That's what we're asking for the opportunity to do.
Well, yes, financing is at the heart of the problem, but another issue is the capacity of your client to be able to complete this project.
Understood.
We haven't seen that performance or the willingness of that performance in 10 years. So for us to take on more of a burden and potentially cost the city more money to have the same outcome in 45 or 60 days or whatever we amend it to business-wise, that's difficult. That's going to be difficult for all of us to make that decision.
Well, I've got a suggestion for you. What happens if we took and postponed it until 9/23? That's a little over 90 days from now. Gave him an opportunity to do the job or get out. And we took a 90-day bet that he would, so we got to get some trust somewhere. And I know I'm talking to a banker, but it's just, if we trusted him for 90 days, and then at 90 days, well, I won't be here, but it'd be
Understood.
drop dead.
Understood.
Would that satisfy you?
If we do anything longer than 30 days, I want checkpoints within that 90 days. I want checkpoints for when the bond is issued. I want checkpoints for when the financing is going to be done. I want to be able to see balance sheets and loan to value on other properties so we know what kind of cash flow we're dealing with moving into this. Because it's evident that no matter what dollar amount is issued, there is for whatever reason, whether it's the borrower or the market or whatever, there is a capacity for repayment to not happen. And I think there's a bank in this room that would agree, because they're betting on us to do what we need to do, because if we don't, they're not gonna get paid.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, as we continue to put resources into this as a city, that's something that we need to be vigilant of as well. Because that's 90 more days of resources that we have to commit Anthony to, and 90 more days of resources that we have to commit our police in response to.
And that's probably cheaper on us than it is on the bank. I would assume. I don't know the notes. How do you want to do that, or are you?
One of the things I would recommend is, if we're going to go that far, that there be a provision in there that requires that the property owner waive their right to appeal if council ultimately determines that it should be condemned and torn down.
That makes me feel better. That makes me feel better than a bond.
Okay. We ought to check with his counsel. Just a second, let me check with him.
I'm obviously extremely hesitant to waive my rights, my client's rights for appeal. Otherwise, we haven't gotten into the meat of everything today. We were presented that book tonight, so I want to make sure we understand everything before we're waiving any right to appeal. I can't do that.
Well, and we're being put in a position where we're taking on more risk with the potential of condemnation and the collapse of your client's financial stability through other projects that we have seen the track record of. So, I mean, somebody's gonna have to take a risk in this situation. And I'm not in the position to vote to put the city in that position to take the risk. We've already been taking the risk.
Right. I understand. And that was our effort with the bond, to put the bond in place and present that security so that would be our backing to secure that risk.
The only thing that I would agree to postpone is to postpone this until we get the language of the bond. And then maybe we can decide from there. But until we understand what kind of surety that the city has against this project and the hedging of future funds towards these borrowers, that's the only thing I could agree to do. And I'm not talking 30 days. How long do you think it would take to get that bond in place with your clients?
I don't know exactly. Do you know, Roger, timeframe?
July 8th would
Okay.
be the first meeting in July, if you wanted to go that far.
Could we do it by July 8th, the first meeting in July?
What's today, 16th? We can make every effort to do that, yeah.
Okay, so my motion would be to postpone this until July 8th to where we can get the language of the bond to see what type of surety and guarantee we have to protect the city financially from any more risk associated with this project. And then at that point, if we are unable to have a good legal understanding of it, or we're not comfortable with it, then we can move forward with the proceedings of what we originally talked about tonight.
Councilmember, as I say, July 8th is the Tuesday after July 4th weekend. Could we move to the following Tuesday so we get away from a holiday weekend?
Well, and I'm fine if it goes to a study session, because we don't need to vote on it anyway. So if that's the following,
Okay, that'd be
15.
July the
15th,
15th, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I understand your amendment to be, you're gonna postpone until July 15th, to be able to see the language of the bond. Is it called an instrument or bond itself?
Yeah, just-
Okay.
the
So-
structure of it.
Just so staff's on the same page. In terms of, in that scenario, is there any more re-noticing for any future council action? Because the notice, Mr. Purinton, how long was the notice period to get to here?
Okay, before we discuss.
So we're
this,
back to 30.
We need to see, he has a second.
I'll second it.
Do we get to ask questions
Yeah,
about that?
I'm just trying to get through his motion, then I'll ask you first, I promise. So I have your language right, correct? Councilmember Hinkle?
Yes.
Councilmember? I need a second.
I'll say.
You a second. I have a motion and a second. Now I've got a problem because Councilmember Grant wants to speak.
It's okay.
Councilmember Grant.
I have a question for Mr. Purinton. I think it should be pretty clear that I would direct us to go ahead and condemn. And in that scenario, if we're of enough of a mindset that we're done with the chances, what does that process look like for that building being gone?
So the.
Timeline, if you have a rough estimate.
Yeah, there would be, essentially, the statute does help us in that regard. The resolution itself gives the owner a date certain in which to complete the work. If they don't complete the work, then the city would initiate, we would have to bid out the project, and then we would bid out the project, award it to the lowest bidder. It would have to come back to council, and then upon adoption of, the contract with whoever bid that for the demolition, then it would go forward, depending, so council does have some control as to the timing.
Okay. With regard to the amendment, so we would just be behind by that many days if we were to do a study session or whatever.
I'm honestly not sure I understand the amendment necessarily in terms of like going back to a study session and then we'd going back to a council meeting.
Yeah, it would seem more sensible to go back to a council meeting so it can be up or down.
Because I think at a certain point, if at that point, things have changed. I think you kind of have to have another hearing at that point. I don't think you can have that during a study session.
Right.
And so, for what that's worth.
So it would be longer than 15 days. It'd be longer than 30 days potentially.
Well, and there's also, I think, some confusion from staff in terms of like, there's a lot of moving parts to that, right? And to expect that to be done within 30 days, especially when I think that, financing, if that is truly the crux of the issue, I don't know on their project schedule where that's out. I thought I saw August.
We don't allow them to do anything.
So, because I think staff's also, Greg, if you want to talk about this, in a difficult situation in terms of the permit review process and where it occurs within that 30 days, because, Greg, I'll let you talk about that.
And just for clarification from our building official's perspective, if the financing is contingent upon the issuance of a permit, staff would be required to issue a permit prior to that 30 days.
What I'm requesting is for the shoring up of the device that's going to protect the city from taking any more risk for these developers.
So that would not require a building
And that's
permit
what
in
I'm
our
saying, like,
understanding.
we will not issue the permit or even consider the permit until we understand what type of protection we have from any more financial liability moving forward on this project. And if that's a postponement for 30 days, that's fine, but I'm not gonna vote to issue permits in that time frame. That needs to be first, before, if we can't protect us from the investment that we've already put into this property, then how can we invest any more going forward with this developer that we've had 10 years to do something with? So I wanna know specifically and in detail how the city is protected by this bond before we issue any permits that allows them to get financing to pay off the other bank and to potentially renovate this building.
Or
And if-
condemn.
And if we're not shored up by the language in that bond, then we will vote to condemn. I will vote to condemn.
If I may, so part of issuing a permit is a review, potentially resubmittals, and there's often a back and forth. And so with this pending action, we've been in a holding pattern on what we call the building code review. and the fire code review. And so there's the review component of it, and then there's the actual issuance of the permit, right? And the permit is a promise, or we're saying, yes, you can do something typically with the issue of a permit. So what I'm hearing is, we would not issue the permit. My question to council would be, do we even review it for building code and fire code issues in this gray arena we're in?
My statement is that if the developer is willing to take out a bond that is meant to be a protective instrument against or for the city, then we are willing to listen to what the language of that bond is, and they should be willing to wait for the permit until they can provide that information to us.
Thank you.
If I can interject, Councilman, that would be helpful for us, though, the review process, which is a normal practice of city permitting, to see the back and forth in the interim. That would be helpful to us.
Does the bonding require the permits?
No, not the bonding, the financing does.
Okay.
For final closing on the financing, we'd have to have.
I mean, I'm not willing to issue permits for financing until I understand where the city's risk is protected.
And I understand that. I tend to think it would be helpful if Greg and my client could go back and forth in a normal permit review process in the interim over the next 30 days so that they can see if there's any hiccups on the building permit plans that were already submitted. Really detailed permit plans. I think he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on these architectural drawings. So that would be helpful, and that would be a normal process that would happen, as Greg said, back and forth. That would be helpful for all of us, I think, to see just as much as if the financing is legitimate, let's see if the plans are legitimate, to make sure those are fitting as well.
I mean, if the city takes on any more risk on this and has to abate the property and pay for all of these other things that we've already been paying for 10 years, then I'm not concerned about the financing of your client at this point. I'm concerned about protecting the city's financial position in regards to this property that has not done anything for the city in a decade. I'm sorry, I
agree.
really want this property to be reactivated as a hotel.
I know.
But from my position, I don't know how we can talk about continuing to move forward with permits when we don't know what our risk is gonna be, and we don't know the financial situation of your client, other than the fact that we know that there's lots of foreclosures and a property that hasn't had much done on a $15 million loan in 10 years. So,
Well, let's ask them to vote, and then we can see if that'll even work. No, you're doing fine. I think you're in there. Motion on the floor is to postpone until July 17th, 2025 for bond language. Council members? Oh, not 15th?
July 15th.
What is it? I'm sorry. The motion on the floor is to postpone until July 17th. No.
July 15th.
Okay. Motion on the floor is to postpone until July 15th, 2025 for bond language, council members, you may cast your vote.
What in the world? Can't even
Yeah,
add.
4 against.
Okay. The motion fails by a vote of 3 to 4. Voting in favor, Councilmember Holman, Councilmember Hinkle, and Mayor Hykela.
All right, so that leaves us without resolution. Is there another motion on the floor to resolve this?
Okay, we have, hang on, let me turn these.
Councilmember Peacock.
That was actually on the previous item, but
Oh, you're still going. Councilmember Montoya.
Likewise.
Okay. Councilmember Grant. Okay. Well, then we vote the original language, right?
Can I get a motion in a second?
All right. The language in this is a resolution declaring that certain structures in the city of Norman are dilapidated and detrimental to the health, safety, benefit, and welfare of the general public, directing the removal of the structure established in the date in which the work shall be completed by the owner, and authorizing the city manager to take steps to cause work to be completed by the city if not completed by the owner within the day specified. 3 options are reject, amend, or postpone this resolution. Need a motion.
Motion to approve, is that?
Okay, motion to approve. I'll second it. Motion to approve.
So the motion on the floor is for demolition?
To adopt the resolution as submitted.
Hearing none? Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to adopt the resolution passes by a vote of 6-1. Voting against, Councilmember Hinkle.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break until 8:15.
Council members, if you're in the lobby, would you please come back inside?
Well, that worked.
Man,
All right,
first. Okay.
ready? We're reconvened, taking item number 2, consideration of approval, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of contract K 2425128, service and lease agreement with City Care Incorporated for the operation of an emergency overnight shelter and budget appropriation as outlined in the staff report. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the contract.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Have a motion and second. This item was previously postponed. Are there any, don't do that? That's what,
It's just ready for Anthony.
it's ready for Anthony.
All right, this one's much smaller, I promise. So we're back in front of you now that it's the new fiscal year, or about to be, for the new contract for the overnight shelter. So for the most part, it's remained the same. It's a reimbursement contract for the operation of the emergency overnight shelter. This period would be for the full fiscal year. So July 1st to June 30th, again, security would be provided in essentially the same manner. The contractor, is going to employ housing navigators to provide case management. All that remains the same, and the location remains the same, 109 West Gray, while we work on an alternative. For funding, that's going to be the one to shift, obviously, since we've moved from a very, quick turnaround contract for a portion of the fiscal year. Now we're looking at a full fiscal year after we've gotten established with the contractor. The current reimbursement under our current contract is in good shape. We're actually under budget, so that's great. I don't have any specific numbers that, it is technically, we're not there yet, but we are expected very comfortably to be under budget going into the new fiscal year. I think a lot of that will probably be due to staffing. They've had to cover a lot of staffing positions as they've gotten people on board with salary positions, and so far that's not been something that they've been requesting reimbursement for. So for what that's worth, we have seen pretty good reimbursements coming back, and they've been very good about staying on target. For next year, we are requesting about a 7% increase to, I think, the program budget. Council has adopted, and it was approved, about $750,000 for next year's budget for this particular purpose. So that was just our estimate based on the current contract amount. And we would need, under the new contract that's proposed tonight, an additional appropriation in the amount of $56,851.77. That would be meeting what the total reimbursement amount of the contract is. That is, we want to have enough money on hand in order, if they, request every single cent that they are allocated in that budget, we want to make sure we have it on hand. Keep in mind, it is a reimbursement basis, so we're only reimbursing for actual costs, so it is much more likely that it will not reach that full amount. Also, importantly to note, we think that this year's current savings on the reimbursement will likely cover above and beyond that additional increase from what we've already budgeted. So we're in good shape because of the way that the budget rolls over, or it doesn't roll over, so it would go back into the general fund. So it's not like it's already there and it will still be there, but that's why we're requesting that additional appropriation. So the total budget, last year's budget was around $62,000 for every month, and then this month it's gone up to $67,000. The increases to that is going to be for shelter operation expenses, like shelter supplies. Specifically, that line item increased, as well as the linen contract. I think that went up as well. So the line item for linen specifically has gone up, and that was a couple thousand. You'll also notice the admin fee went up from what was 10% to what is now in the proposed contract 12.5%. The reason that decision was made was after talking with the contractor, CityCare, the city, they're very interested in pursuing ESG funding this new fiscal year, now that we're kind of comfortable and can get into the grant cycle. In order to do that, that's going to take more administrative time on their part, and this increase of 2.5% would account for that. Also, what we're doing is shifting from 10% of the reimbursed amount to a 12.5% flat reimbursement based on the budget that is in the contract. So they would get paid the same every month. The reason that we think that this is a good approach is because if they are successful in getting funding elsewhere through third parties, we don't want that admin, we don't want to penalize them for getting funding and then reducing the city's reimbursement in the long run. So we don't want to de-incentivize that. So that's also why we were comfortable shifting it to that model. And also, I think the portion of the ESG funding that they're looking for is going to be for that housing navigator specific portion of the contract. So the staffing, if they do get the full amount or, you know, any amount really would reduce the city's contribution. So I think that's it.
Councilmember Peacock?
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple questions. That last point about the ESG grant, do you have to know like what dollar amount we're pursuing on that?
I don't.
Or a range even?
I don't know if those numbers have been finalized. It's also, you know, dependent on how much is, you know, awarded. So I'm not sure. I want to say if they're only asking for the housing case management or the housing navigator, I think that's probably going to be 40 to 60,000 what the budget is for that particular line. So I don't think it would be in excess of that. But and that's just one example of the kind of stuff that they would be.
Seems like it's going to be more than the 7493 we've got here budgeted, and so I think that's money well spent. If we're able to spend that to go potentially get dollars to offset the overall cost,
yeah,
I think that's money well spent. So are there any material changes in this version of the contract from the previous version?
Material, like there are a few changes, I will say. I think the one jumping out to me is we did take out a line item that said reimbursable expenses should not include food. Because what we found, even with the previous contractor, is in times of for example, severe weather or, you know, other, we found ourselves approving those kinds of expenses anyway. So we went ahead and took that out. We're also comfortable doing that because CityCare in particular has a very, very, very good track record of partnering with donated food items. So we're not necessarily concerned that they're going to be spending a ton of money on food items, and also they're constrained by what their budget allows, which, you know, knowing what comes in every month and seeing what they're spending the money on, it's not gonna be like they're gonna be able to, you know, spend a ton of money on that anyway. It's just, I think, to get them by without having to constantly approve it as we go.
Okay, and that was probably the biggest change from the last version of the contract?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think pretty much that was it for the most part.
And I know this isn't necessarily related to the actual contract, but do you have any kind of status update for the search for a new location? And you don't have to get into details of where it might be or where they are, but is it still active, I guess I'll ask?
Absolutely. I mean, we're making, you know, we have, I will say that we're pretty much in line with, I think, other recommendations that council's heard recently. And I think we're, you know, if we're using that as a, you know, waypoint, we're pretty, a good amount of the chunk there. I mean, I'm not going to tell you we're going to be out of this location for, you know, a year from now even. I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that we are working very hard to find another location. Well, I should say secure another location that we think that council, for example, knows.
Would you say that we are farther along on that journey than we have been in the past?
Well, yes, definitely, 100%. And again, keep in mind, we have, you know, we're pursuing one option very actively. That's not to say, like, we've also been pursuing other options. We have decided, you know, in doing our due diligence on each one that comes available, CityCare has been very helpful in sourcing new locations through their contacts even, particularly through faith-based organizations. You know, we were able to vet those. So we've had, you know, even though we're pursuing one, that doesn't mean our minds are closed off to other potential locations that may be better or quicker or suit another purpose that we think is.
Well, you answered my last question was going to be, are we doing this hand in hand with City Care? Are they at the table while we're going through the selection process? And so appreciate you speaking to that, and I think it's all I got.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, this is an opportunity for members of the public to make comments regarding this item. Remarks should be directed to council only. Once public comments have concluded, council may choose to answer your questions.
We'll start with Alex Lampier.
Here, Ward 2, I just want to urge you guys to vote yes tonight on this. I feel like if this is ended, all of the problems that people complain about, people sleeping in doorways on Main Street and shopping carts, are going to continue to get worse. It's getting hot out there. It's going to continue to get hotter. People will suffer and die. Yeah, please vote yes. Thank you.
Next is Caleb McGee. And following Caleb will be Stephen Lett.
Good evening, Caleb McGee, Ward 4. I also came to urge you to vote yes to extend the contract. We need somewhere for people to go. Like Mr. Lanfear said, these temperatures can be lethal. In particular, I want to let you know about a phenomenon that I've noticed. When you're on foot on concrete, you know, it gets hot. You're getting hot. You get hotter. You sit down to rest, and you expose more of your body to that hot concrete. And while it feels better to sit down, you're raising your temperature, and you get weaker, and you get a little befuddled. Then maybe you lay down, and then you're exposing the entirety of your body to that hot concrete. And it's like getting cooked on a flat top. Heat injuries send a ton of people to the hospital every year, and we can't have that. That's not who we are. Vote yes, please.
Stephen? Steve Ellis, you will follow Mr. Lett.
Steve Lett, Ward 4. I am also here to ask you all to vote yes on the contract. We should be pouring as much money as possible. I also, contrary to Councilmember Peacock, I'm a fan of the downtown location. I live in the area. I love seeing my friends out there. So if that is one of the spots that comes up, if there are locations, I totally support it, and a number of us do. The only other thing I'd say is I did hear that sort of they were coming in under budget on some things, specifically like around staff. And I mean, one of the things that I would sort of urge you all to tell maybe city staff to tell City Care is that it would be awesome if they paid their staff more. My understanding is when the handoff happened, there was a big reduction in pay. So I know that the industry standard, which is a very disgusting term for like what you pay shelter staff, it's very low. Like there's hardly a barrier between the unhoused folks and shelter staff at that level of pay. So yeah, if you all could press to have sort of a better pay rate for staff. Anyway, that's it. But of course, vote yes.
Steve Ellis, Ward 4. I'm going to urge you to vote yes as well. For a variety of reasons, our shelter situation isn't really perfect. It's not big enough. I'm glad they scratched the line about food. because I know, having dropped off food there, that, it is very helpful in times of necessity. It's also a really good place for people like at the University of Oklahoma who have leftovers to sort of like donate their food to, which is what we were doing. So I think that's a contract improvement. I would second Steve Lett's suggestion that the staff talk to them about making working at the shelter a living wage. The last time I dropped off food there, the woman who received the food, who was working for the shelter, was very happy to see it because she hadn't eaten yet. But it's clear that it's this or nothing right now, and this is a ton better than nothing, although it can get better. So hopefully we'll find a bigger location, maybe even have two. But it will be nice to see this progress as we go forward. But that starts with a yes vote tonight. Thank you.
Marguerite Larson. Ella Crenshaw will follow Marguerite, I'm sorry.
Marguerite Larson, Ward 6. I don't know what else I can add to that, to be perfectly honest. So this is really your chance to show humanity, empathy, and compassion to people who are already vulnerable. And you need to vote yes. And I agree with paying the staff a living wage, because that's what we all want, is a living wage. With living wages, you can afford a home to live in. So I am urging you to vote yes to extend this contract. Thank you.
Ella Crenshaw. Riley Worley, you will follow next.
Hi, Ella Crenshaw, Ward 6. I also want to urge you to vote yes. I would say that, when I first saw this on the agenda for today, I thought, wow, 6 months has gone by real fast. And it's kind of crazy that y'all have to keep voting over and over to keep approving this contract, since we can't get a permanent location set up yet. But at the same time, I think it's really great that y'all have this opportunity to continue to affirm your support for some of the most vulnerable members of our community. So I'm also really happy to hear about the food. I think it's great to feed people. So thank you.
If Riley Worley's not here, Michael Blanc.
Michael Blanc, Ward 6. Well, things have already been well articulated tonight, but please vote in favor of this contract. It sounds like we're in a good position to finally have a stable year-long contract. Hopefully, we can find a more permanent, location or multiple locations for shelters in the future. But this is a needed service, especially with uncertainty in our economy. It just puts more of the families in our town at risk of losing their home, losing shelter, and the people who live in our community who already don't have those things rely on this service. And so this is honestly a necessity for any community of any size, but especially one as large as Norman. It's something that we just need to have until we can find a better solution for making sure our neighbors have permanent housing. So please vote in favor of this contract. It is money well spent. Thank you so much.
Floyd Carroll, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I was happy that Stephen Ellis got it passed last time at $62,000. I don't know what they're doing with that money, but I just wanted my lawnmower back. They've stolen my lawnmower for 10 years. And the baby's wagons. I don't know, that's what homeless do. And they stole their little bicycles for them 12-inch rims. So this guy over here, he thinks he's worried about the city's money. How come he's not worried about the people that live here? I don't know how you develop your job security, but if you can't protect the citizens, what are you guys doing up there? You're worried about your money? You should be worried about our money. So I'd like to get the Stephen Ellis to get with me on what we can do about the theft business. Actually, I haven't seen a couple prostitutes in a couple of days. Usually they're up and down Main Street over there. And there is 2 or 3 women over there that I thought was going to attack them. And I said, don't touch them. They may have something you don't want. And I don't know how to get a handle on that, because one of them laid down beside my car, and because this young man told me that there's no such thing as squatter rights, the police told me they did.
Floyd, would you got to keep it to the comments on this item, if you would, please.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's it? Oh, okay. Any final?
I'll just say that I really feel like City Care has brought a lot to this issue. Making the shelter that we have run better and potentially have less of an impact on downtown Norman and some of the other areas that maybe have some adverse reactions to our most vulnerable citizens. I would hope that the city of Norman, the residents of Norman, see that there are those of us that are committed as council members to taking care of our most vulnerable citizens and looking for new locations and finding more resources to be able to do that, whether that's the direction we give to city staff and the work that they put towards it to make gains in that regard, or Councilmember Grant tirelessly searching for affordable housing options and making that a big function of, her time spent here and our resources like the Social and Voluntary Services Commission and Lisa Craig and our collaborative applicants with Thunderbird. I mean, there's a lot of people that this is very important to, including myself. And I'll definitely be voting yes to continue with City Care tonight. I'm glad that Food and Shelter has been able to go back to focusing on their mission, which I think they do a wonderful job in our community. And there's a lot of people that are pulling on this rope together, and sometimes it may not feel like we're making a lot of progress, but from where I'm sitting, we are making progress. It's just kind of takes a little bit. As many problems that can lead to somebody finding themselves unhoused. There's a lot of things that we have to change to be able to make progress moving forward. And again, I think that there's those of us that are committed to making those changes. It just takes a little while to move the pendulum.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes, to echo one of our commenters tonight, I'm happy to affirm support for our unhoused community. I do see that the shelter is a puzzle piece in a much larger puzzle, and that there'll be many avenues to address homelessness through mental health and substance abuse, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, all the housing. I believe we're on track to realize that, especially as our housing, pro-housing grant work that we have coming up, which will be a study and an action plan, comes online. I do hear the comments about a living wage for the shelter employees, and I hope some of the money that City Care is able to secure through grant fundraising will enable those employees to have a living wage, which I think in oversight last week, it was 19 something an hour for Norman. Anyways, I'm happy to vote yes on this, and I hope that the rest of council feels confident in the job that City Care is doing. Thank you.
Councilmember Dixon?
I'd like to start off with City Cares. They do pay their employees benefits. They also have paid vacation and paid sick leave. I have no idea what their wage is, but they do have some benefits. So I'd also like to say, I don't like that the shelter is 100% city funded. I don't like it. I wish some other groups would step up and help us out on that, but here's where we're at. Also don't really like where it is. They're on downtown. There has to be a better place for it. That said, we're not voting tonight on where it is, or where it's not. I believe City Cares does a fantastic job. They've found housing for 13 people in the last 6 months. They're not housing people, they're finding housing for people. And I'd also like to say that I don't believe that our shelter users, that's not who's typically causing problems downtown or in other parts of town. It's not them. It's easy to make this one big homogeneous population. It isn't. I realize that, I see that. One of the things I really, really like about City Cares, they're actively working on relationships with the faith-based community. I've heard that for years. Faith-based should be the ones doing this. They're not, whatever. City Cares is working on relationships with them. They're partnering with them. They're really building a broader community, so it's not just the city writing a check every month and City Cares just doing their thing. City Cares is also actively working on relationships with the business community to find grants, to find donations. They're actively trying to, kind of what I started with, to get the city out of being a 100% funding source of the shelter. Like, they're doing the work. I appreciate that. I think they do a great job. And again, they're not just housing people, they're finding houses or housing for people. And I think with this increase from 10% to 12.5% to pay somebody who's going to go out and look for federal grants, state money, there's probably no state money, federal money, to really, really help out their mission and what they're doing, I think that's money well spent. I do get that it's very expensive. I figured up, this comes out to like $42 per day per person. It's expensive. It's an expensive population. But man, it's expensive just to not do anything also. I get that. So anyways, that's a lot of words to say. I really appreciate what City Cares is doing for the unhoused population in the city of Norman, and trying to help us mitigate that best they can.
Councilmember Holman?
Yes, I can't really add anything more than my colleagues have added. I am going to support this contract and agree with the comments that have been made. I just would add, for those that are interested, a few of us were out of town last week at a city planning conference, but an oversight committee on Thursday, and it was live streamed on our City of Norman YouTube channel. Mayor Eichler was kind enough to allow the Student Government Association from University of Oklahoma did a presentation of a report entitled "A Place to Call Home: A Community-Driven Plan for Norman's Permanent Shelter" by the University of Oklahoma Student Government Association. So they took upon themselves to do a project to research pretty much the entire city limits of Norman and come up with different locations that would be most suitable, available, things like that for a shelter, a permanent shelter location. And so they just presented that and made a recommendation based on their findings, and they're very interested in helping the city of Norman and any organization in Norman that's interested in dealing with homeless and unhoused issues. But if you're interested in seeing the presentation that they put together and the information that they came up with, that's on the City of Norman YouTube channel under the City Council Oversight Committee from last Thursday. So that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. The motion on the floor is to adopt the contract. Council members, You may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast, and the motion passes by a vote of 6-1, voting against Mayor Heikela.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, you've got the next one is adjournment. Do we, miscellaneous comment? No. All right, we are adjourned.